and then making it so that they like trying to get it so they're drinking urine and feces. That's the most insane, evil thing, man.
All right, here we are once again. We have a treat tonight. You all like your treats. Hope you like your treats. Can you all hear me? Treats. He's just walking around the room. He's not. We're live, by the way. Don't take off your cassock into your underwear or anything, because we're live. Make sure you got your audio right.
Yeah. Can I make a confession?
Please don't confess live on my live stream.
Are you live
It
actually?
is live.
Oh, no. I was gonna make a
No
joke.
confessions. I can't hear your confession. I could do like a Roman Catholic priest and just give you a penance, tell you to say
I just wanted to show you my
10
Russian
Hail Marys.
passport that I am a KGB.
Oh, proof you're a KGB operative.
You see it?
Are you doxing yourself? Why are you putting? Is that gonna have your address and stuff on it?
No.
Don't do that. Okay.
No address.
Welcome
I
everybody.
just figured I'd get that out of the way real quick.
Welcome everybody. This is the live Moscow Kremlin KGB Putin stream. We are streaming live from the Kremlin basement, and I have with me tonight's KGB operative, fellow Dugan handled Father Deacon Dr. Ananias. Yeah, so welcome back. It's been many months. We haven't done a live stream in many months, and that wasn't on purpose. We've just been super busy. I've ramped up the live streaming that I've been doing, and from my vantage point, the more people come at me, that really just engages me to work harder. It doesn't make me back down. I just work harder. So I'm not going to cease doing what we do and covering all these bases. And so Father Deacon Dr. Ananias joins me tonight. I did get to see most of the live stream that you did with David Patrick Harry, which I thought was good, on the NPC and the no internal monologue. I've actually been thinking for a long time how to understand this, because we know human beings don't lose their human nature. So I've been just on my own pondering how could they not have an internal monologue? Like, how do you read a book, or how do you, like somebody said, or I think DPH said, how do you take a test if you can't think through the questions? And I think you guys had a good point that maybe it might relate to something like where Paul talks about they've burned out their conscience or something like that. I thought that was a good insight. What was the final conclusion before we get into tonight's stuff that you guys came to? Because I didn't finish the full video. Did you guys come to a conclusion? Like, how could you not have an internal monologue?
Yeah, what was the conclusion? I mean, we're kind of piecing stuff together. We're still
Okay.
kind of it seemed that it could be both an intellectual and character vice. And that it could also be a product of just this kind of social media and Pavlovian kind of conditioning machine that has, I mean, look, if we've got a rise in autism and a rise in all kinds of different like mental health issues and stuff like that because of the world that we live in, I mean, is it any surprise that people would have cognitive impairments, not to mention vices, intellectual and moral vices? And so it's not that they're not thinking, but like one girl said, she thinks in concepts. And can somebody get this back? I don't know. Like, I'm sure that you could practice and get that back, but it definitely seemed to be a deficiency. But isn't it interesting that in modern society, that what's normally cognitive, deemed as cognitive impairments, mental illness, is now celebrated as like superpowers?
What do you mean? I mean, they talk about autism like it's a superpower. But
Yeah,
what's the
yeah,
cognitive
that's,
impairment?
well, the cognitive impairment, when you're reading through some of these first person accounts that I don't have, an inner monologue. I think through concepts. I think through pictures, and I don't need to. A lot of these people were speaking as if it was some type of virtue or something, and I thought that was weird.
I see what you're saying. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, like that would somehow be virtuous. Yeah, that's really weird.
That's better or something, that I don't have to have a.
Yeah.
Some of them, I think, were actually saying that
Right.
I don't have to have an inner monologue. I can just think. But then we showed how that was tied to the moral sphere. That if I don't have an inner monologue, it makes introspection and conscience very difficult to obtain. I don't know if it's impossible, but it's certainly an obstacle, right? Now we're going to talk about.
Yeah, I'm just pulling up the Brian Holdsworth video. So
I was just going to say,
go ahead.
How theology gone wrong can also cause some cognitive impairments too.
Yep. Before we get to that, a couple opening points. So tonight we're going to talk about, the first point will be this continual issue that pops up, which multiple people this week asked me about it. It came up in other arenas on Discord, in chats. It came up with a clip that somebody sent me from Lofton this week, where Lofton was making the exact same mistake that we've been talking about for so long. And people were saying, how can you explain this? This seems to be really difficult to get across to people. And it's the issue of confusing normativity, or the ought, or some body of group that can interpret and bind people and say what you ought to say, what you ought to believe in terms of the authority in the church, versus the question of individual epistemic certainty. And the confusion is always, the argument always goes like this. If you're a Roman Catholic, you have an answer to this dilemma. Not every Roman Catholic, but most of them, at least at the pop level, make this argument. The Roman Catholic Church offers you a solution to this problem by giving you the easy answer that the papacy will give you certainty. And so I'm going to ask you, Father Deacon Dr. Ananias, as a professor, what is the philosophical problem with this? I mean, I know how I would answer it, but I want to hear you answer it. This bad argument. Why is it a bad argument? What is the philosophical problem with just saying, look, hey, we got a trump card on you Orthodox because we have the papacy. It tells us with certitude what dogma is.
Well, the first mistake, the most obvious, would seem that it's a begging the question. I mean, what if I ran around and be like, I can solve all of your problems when it comes to philosophy. Let me think for you. Let me give you. What if I?
That's a good point. If you just make me your final arbiter, I'll solve the problem. You won't have an epistemic dilemma anymore, right?
Yeah. And so, well, why is it begging the question? Is that, well, if something is able to deliver infallibly, or is an infallible standard or something like that, there are later questions of, well, how would I know that infallibility? But what's begging the question is, but that's exactly what's in question. Those two things. Is it an infallible standard? How do I know? Actually, I would say three. And how does that solve the problem? And what are they going to appeal to? Well, if you accept this, doesn't it solve all the problems? But that's what's in question. Well, you're begging the answer from the question. Let's use the question to answer that. Do you see what the issue is there, everybody?
Yep. So it's just moving the problem back a step.
Yes. Then we can ask, suppose I granted that. Does it solve the problem? So there's two issues. So simply saying it does, and don't we go over this in epistemology all the time? Simply because somebody says something that this is the case or this solves this, and epistemology, going through the bonjour, every single epistemologist and philosopher says, well, this will solve the problem, right? But does it? And are we not supposed to question that? Does that actually do the work that you say it does? So two issues there. How do we know that would be the case without vicious circularity? You're begging the question. Second, even if I granted that, does it do the work that you want it to do?
Yes, great point. So the first, another addendum to that is that the response will usually be by Roman Catholics something like, "Well, we know the papacy is the final arbiter because Jesus established it." And you ask these people, okay, so how do we know that the papacy was divinely established by Jesus to be what you say at Vatican I? Because, of course, they'll equivocate on divinely established as if everything divinely established therefore means indefectibility, infallibility, and perpetuity. No, God established many things that defected and do not last and have not lasted. The period of the judges, God established the judges. It didn't last. God established the temple. Didn't last. God established political authorities. They didn't last, right? All of these things, the churches in Apocalypse 2 and 3, many of them were established by God and many of them fell away. So just because it's, quote, divinely established, this is a favorite argument of Lofton, that therefore it will continue in perpetuity. That's equivocating on the word divinely established. Now, let's see. So papacy, with the argument here is based on the response. Not every Roman Catholic, but many of them will say, oh, well, you see, it's based on the Bible. And Matthew 16 tells us that the keys were given to Peter alone in this first chapter, or in this first area about the keys. They, of course, never talk about Matthew 18, that the exact same thing is said to the whole college of the apostles. It's only to Peter in their mind. And they'll do this. So they'll say, look, the papacy is grounded on the Bible. And the Bible is what tells us this, because Jesus divinely established it to mean what it means at Vatican I, supposedly, right, via Matthew 16. But when the same Roman Catholics will debate Protestants, and you say, how do you know what the Bible is? The canon. They don't make the same argument that we do. Notice we often appeal to tradition, and they will as well. However, what they mean by tradition, as Vatican I says, is that the Pope is the final arbiter and interpreter of tradition. So in other words, for them, the Bible, quite literally, is known by what? By the papacy's decision. So the
papacy is verified by the Bible, and the Bible is verified by the papacy.
Now, what do we call this geometric form here? Maybe this helps us understand what kind of an argument. This is a circular argument because it's a circle, right?
Theology through geometry.
Now, they'll say, well, you say arguments are circular at a paradigm level. Yeah, but I'm not a classical foundationalist. And 99.9% of Roman Catholicism is predicated on classical foundationalism as an epistemology. Investigate in the early church, and you will see that everybody at all times always held to the Vatican I view of the papacy. Leo XIII, Satis Cognitum, says this. So, but what's wrong with this, Father Deacon? Why can't I just say this? Why can't I say, well, look, maybe it just is this way. Maybe both these things are the case. The papacy confirms the Bible, and the Bible was confirmed by the papacy. So what's wrong with this?
Well, like I said, you and I wouldn't have a problem in certain respects with circularity. But does it do the work? So,
well, what do you mean by do the work? Because a lot of people might be confused as to what that's referring to.
Does it provide you good reasons, right? Is the sort of thing that you plug in there provide good reasons that I would actually know, or to hold this to be true? Mm-hmm. And so if I said everything in this book by Ackrell right here is true, and how do we know that? Well, because it says everything in this book is true. Now, it might be everything in this book is true, correct? But can I plug this in and use that as is that a good reason to, right? Is there anything about this book that would fit the condition? So, for example, to have God himself be self-referential, right? Self-authenticating. I mean, at some point, there's an ultimate standard, right, that we get to epistemically. So you and I don't have a problem with saying there's nothing beyond God that you would verify God by. He's that by which everything else is verified, correct? Well, isn't that circular? How do you know that? It's a thing that must be assumed. Well, the problem why this stuff isn't working is pretty much because of finitude, right? And the kind of dialectical interplay is, like, as I like to call it, between the two terms, right? So notice both are considered to be infallible, right? But only insofar as one's infallible, right? The papacy, but the papacy is only infallible if the other thing's infallible, right? So nothing actually, given the nature of themselves, stand on their own. It's a dialectical interplay. As I always point out, you can't answer the one without the number two, and you can't answer number two without number one. And so we've got this kind of division and finitude that makes it, what can't do the work. Do you see what I'm saying? There's a sort of kind of epistemic bootstrapping and circularity. That's not a problem for God himself. He's the ultimate standard. Every Roman Catholic would say that obviously God has to be a higher standard than the Pope, right? So again, in time, finite, and the dialectical interplay between the two is what makes that circularity problematic. And add the addition too of, and your own philosophical presuppositions preclude that too. So you're inconsistent. Does that make sense?
So let's look at another way to illustrate this too, which I've drawn out on the infamous whiteboard, which is, we'll oftentimes hear in regard to infallibility, the idea that, and I think this is useful to speak this way because every Roman Catholic, whether they're trad or just Novus Ordo or rad trad or whatever, they will all agree with this first phrase that the things that are infallible are that are binding are the dogmas. And right, so there's criteria, there's status and levels of Roman Catholic dogma, but I don't think it's a controversial statement to say that the infallible dogmas are binding on everybody, right? So when we ask when we probe the Roman Catholic about, well, so your position, you say, is superior to Orthodoxy because you have this trump card where the papacy will give you the certitude about the infallible dogmas. All I have to do is ask you a couple of questions to illustrate the fact that it doesn't actually do this. So it's fine. I understand. So let's say we grant this person that, okay, so let's say in your system that that's the case, that only the infallible dogmas are what's really ultimately binding. You can have debates on the other issues, but can't debate the dogmas, right? So how does this do you any good when there's no actual list of the infallible dogmas? And this puts every individual Roman Catholic in no better epistemic situation or no epistemic advantage over anyone else in trying to figure out through the giant piles of Roman Catholic papal statements, ecumenical council statements, canon law, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You have to sift through all of this. How do you know which ones are which? It's going to come down to, it's fine for you to say all day long, well, it's the ones that are infallible. Yeah, but you don't have a list as to which ones those are. So in other words, let's make this really simple to illustrate this point. Here's, right, it says only infallible dogmas are binding. Okay, I'll grant you that, Roman Catholic. Now, tell me, where is the list of the infallible dogmas? And they will all say there isn't one. Or they might try to say, well, maybe it's Denzinger. Well, no, it can't be Denzinger because Denzinger doesn't have everything in it. Doesn't have all the decrees of the ecumenical councils. Denzinger doesn't have Vatican II. Uh-oh. Right?
Isn't this exactly similar to the Protestant? All the books of the Bible are infallible. Okay, where's the list of that?
Well, there isn't one. It's just what the church gave me. This is the typical. It's what God providentially gave the Martin Luther, right? That's what that Pastor P was saying. But look, the first claim, right, is useless to you as to actually giving you any certitude if you don't have the list of the dogmas. Now, if there was an infallible list of dogmas that the Roman Catholic Church actually had, then maybe this wouldn't actually be an objection. But they don't have one. And in fact, every individual Roman Catholic will disagree as to what makes up this. So what has this system actually achieved for you if there's no infallible list, right? Because guess what? The way the system is constructed, every individual Catholic who goes to interpret the Roman Catholic papal statements, the encyclicals, the apostolic acts of the Apostolic See, the decrees of ecumenical councils, the on and on and on. It's going to be up to that individual Catholic to suss out which fits into what criteria. And we've made this point so many times. I don't understand how people can't get this.
I just realized after talking to you how similar this really is to Chisholm's problem of criterion. Number one, what's the extent of our justified beliefs? Infallible. Well, what's the criteria for justification? Infallibility, right? So you kind of have this circularity, right?
Well, yeah, and we can construct similar points when we come to issues like indefectibility. I could write this out in a very similar way. I might do that here in a second, but to point out that, okay, it's fine to say all day long, Roman Catholics, that you think the Pope cannot defect. And this is where they get tripped up, because a lot of them don't even know that this is part of their dogma either, because they usually just focus on this
the infallibility.
Infallibility. Oh, well, it's just a question of, which statements are the ones that are binding, and nothing else really counts, right? They love to say, oh, it doesn't count because it wasn't infallible. That one doesn't count. That one doesn't count. Well, first of all, the fact that something isn't infallible doesn't mean it doesn't count. It can still count, because plenty of people in the history of the church who had absolutely no ability to bind anyone to anything were considered heretics and were excommunicated, and they certainly couldn't bind anybody to anything, and certainly not infallibly. So if the ability to bind someone infallibly is the requirement for being a heretic, no one could be a heretic but the Pope. That's how absurd this is. It's an unfalsifiable system.
So, Jay, what you're saying too is that, so one question is, how do I know something with certitude? And they say infallibility, but that's a separate question than, well, what's the methodology that's used to determine what's actually infallible? And if they come back to infallibility, but that doesn't that's not the method. That's a principle.
It's a dumb circle. Exactly. That's a principle. It doesn't give you the criteria.
It doesn't give you the criteria. That's what I was trying to say.
Exactly.
Good point.
And so this is a really simple, basic.
So it doesn't solve the problem.
It doesn't solve anything. Yeah, it doesn't do anything. It's just like a, I don't know. It's like an illusion.
It's a sleight of hand.
It's a sleight of hand illusion that David Blaine is over there doing in front of you, right? You think he's pulling a chicken foot out of his stomach, and the black girls are going crazy. Ooh, you got a chicken foot? No, that's.
I was just thinking. I thought you were going to say David Lynch from Holland. Oh,
no, David Blaine.
Illusion. Remember that from Mulholland Drive?
Yeah. No, so let's look at another example of this.
Yes.
And apparently, a lot of them aren't aware that this is their own teaching, and I will remind them, and we'll look at this in a moment. So let's look at Dictatus Papae.
Yes.
And we're going to go through some of these. There's the link. I don't know if I can fit them all in a screenshot. I might be able to. Let's see. Let's see if we can do that. So here's the full text of Dictatus Papae. And this is 1090, anywhere from 1075 to 1090 under Pope Gregory the Seventh, during that crucial period of the Gregorian reforms, which Michael Welton discusses at length in his book. So let's look at these, because we're going to see that not only does many other papal documents all the way up into including Vatican I, but let's go back to the Middle Ages to Dictatus Papae, and you'll notice that indefectibility is included here. And I'm sorry, papal lawyers, if you're going to harass over this stupidity, the fact that the phrase indefectibility isn't used. It doesn't matter if the same idea is there. And I mean, you got the way that you guys will obsess over the fact that the wording isn't used. Who cares if the exact same idea is there?
Idea, yeah.
And it says that the Roman Church.
I mean, that's a Protestant objection.
It is a Protestant approach. It's a lawyering approach. Look at number 22. The Roman Church has never erred, nor will it err unto all eternity. The Scriptures bearing witness. That's indefectibility. The Roman Pope, the Roman See, and the Roman See is embodied in his living success, in its living successor, the Pope. So they're intimately tied together. Yes, the See is
because number 2, only the Pope can be rightly called universal Catholic. So what follows immediately from number 2 to elucidate, what elucidates, would you say number 22 is number 2. 22 gives light to 22, doesn't it? It qualifies it.
Well, I mean, we should read the whole list because it's so amazing. It's like over the top. And I mean, it's one of the strongest arguments, I think, against the papacy. And of course, they'll all say, well, this one doesn't count. This one doesn't count. All of these same ideas are mentioned in other places in Catholic theology. So you can sit here and say all day long, this one doesn't count. But if it doesn't count, then all of the other places where it's still in Catholic dogma and Catholic canon law, for example, no man can judge the first see, that's still in your canon law. So don't give me this baloney. Oh, it doesn't count. It doesn't count. That's all you do anytime there's a problem to your system. This is just a weak system is a system that is unfalsifiable, right? Where every piece of contrary data is reinterpreted, right? What's the famous quote attributed to Hegel? If the facts contradict the system, then the facts be damned, right? So Hegel's saying my system is truth, my system is law, and so there is nothing that can contradict it. When something contradicts it, then that is not it's no longer a fact, right? This is you and I had brought this up too. These are subjective, personal ad hocs to rescue the system. It's not like you're appealing to something in Roman canon law to salvage the argument. They're literally personally making up that doesn't count. Oh, really? Well, who are you to decide what? Yeah, well, they don't even have it. Yeah, they haven't even thought about the fact that but you don't judge the first see to say which of their teachings do and don't count. Right? That's not your call to make.
And they do it all the time.
They do it all the time. Yeah. So let's look at this. Let's go through these. The Roman Church was founded by God alone. That's not what Saint Irenaeus says. And remember how often they appeal to Saint Irenaeus to supposedly prove Roman primacy. St. Irenaeus gives Rome a primacy of honor based on Peter and Paul. There's nothing in what St. Irenaeus says and against heresies to do with anything special to Peter. There's nothing to do with a divine charism of indefectibility or infallibility. None of that is there. He says that Rome has its primacy due to being doubly apostolic. In other words, Peter and Paul. And so point number 1, the Roman Church was founded by God alone, is not true because God founded all of the churches through the apostles. So this doesn't even make any sense. The Roman pontiff, and it's not even patristic. The Roman pontiff alone can be called universal. What did Pope St. Gregory the Great say? Any bishop taking to himself the title of exclusive universality is Antichrist. That's their own popes saying this. Number 3, he alone can depose and reinstate bishops. As we know in the ancient canons of the first 7 councils, the Roman bishop has nothing to do with confirming all of the bishops in the world. Here you have in Pope Gregory the Seventh in the time of the Gregorian reforms, the first statement that I'm aware of that the Pope alone can depose and reinstate bishops across the world. Number 4, in his legate, even if a lower grade, is above all bishops and can pass sentence of deposition against everyone. And Sneck just brought to my attention how they like to cite St. Maximus as if he was some sort of Roman papalist. But when St. Maximus was told that the Roman legates were against him, he says, I don't care, then I'm against the Roman legates. So certainly St. Maximus did not have position number 4 in his mind. 5, the Pope may depose the absent. 6, that among other things, we ought to remain in the same house. We ought not remain in the same house with those excommunicated. That's a weird one. 7, for him alone it is lawful, according to the needs of time, to make new laws, to assemble congregations, to make an abbey of canonry, and on the other hand, to divide a rich bishopric and unite the poor ones. That number 8, he alone might use the imperial insignia. What an amazing appropriation of state power to the papacy. And it should be, here's the great irony. Number 1, I found the canons in the ecumenical councils that forbid clerics from state power and state office. And after the donation of Pepin, we know that this, as you pointed out, Father Deacon, brings about the papal states. And I just covered the papal states on a couple podcasts back when I was covering the geopolitical power of the papacy. This is interesting because the canons of Nicaea, of Ephesus and Chalcedon forbid a cleric from being involved in state powers. And if he does get involved in state matters and political matters, he's supposed to be deposed. And so this was tolerated in the West for a long time because the papal states is the beginning of when the papacy begins to kind of start to be. I mean, maybe he's not at this point like completely a state power, because to be fair to the Roman Catholics and to the West, when you have the collapse of the Roman Empire, the papacy filled that vacuum in terms of cultural unity and people looking to some sort of leadership after Rome fell to the barbarians. But that certainly set the stage for getting to this point in 1070, where we have them saying, no, the papacy alone has the usage of the imperial insignia. I mean, this is just crazy level. And how can any Roman Catholic not see that this is like, doesn't make any sense? And look, here, I'm going to show you. So you don't believe me? Let's look at what the canons of Chalcedon said. What are the canons of Chalcedon? And by the way, they're just repeating. Chalcedon is just repeating what is in Ephesus. So I'll put this, let's see.
I'm trying to find something.
It's Canon 7. Canon 7 of Chalcedon says, "We have decreed that those who have been enrolled amongst the clergy, if they are monks or if they have been made monastics," because you can be a monastic without being a priest, "if they're amongst the clergy or monastics, that they shall accept neither military charge nor secular power or dignity. If they shall presume to do so and not repent, then they shall be anathema." So Canon 7 of Chalcedon anathematizes church leaders who take state office. This is also repeated in Canon 3. Canon 3 says, "It has come to the knowledge of the Synod of Chalcedon that those who are enrolled amongst the clergy have, for lust of gain, become hirers of men's possession, and they've made contracts pertaining to secular affairs, like Vatican Bank maybe, and lightly esteeming the service of God, they slip into the houses of secular persons whose property they undertake through covetousness to then manage. Wherefore the great and holy synod declares henceforth that no bishop, clergyman, nor monk shall hire possessions or engage in business or occupy themselves with worldly engagements unless they be called by the law to the guardianship of minors, from which there is no escape, or unless the bishop of the city shall commit him to the care of ecclesiastical business, or of unprovided orphans or widows or persons who stand especially in need of the church's help through the fear of God. And if anyone hereafter shall transgress these, they will be subjected to the ecclesiastical penalties." The ecclesiastical penalty is stated in Canon 7 to be anathematization. So let me show you guys that, because I'm sure people won't believe that this is what it says. Here's the ancient canon. This is Chalcedon. And Chalcedon, again, is just repeating what is in Ephesus and other canons like apostolic canons. So here's this so you can see it. So notice that, and I understand that canon law is not like some sort of infallible rule. We're not saying that canon law is equivalent to the scriptures, because canon law is the church's law applying the principles of scripture to different times and different settings. So it would be absurd to say that it's equated to divine revelation, because some of the sees and bishoprics that were given ranks, right, changed. So if you want to be so silly as to think that divine law changes, it doesn't change, right? In the sense of divine revelation doesn't change, I should say. But the church law can change, because it's the application of situations, the morals to the time period. So there you see, everybody can see it. That's what Chalcedon. So in the days of Pope St. Leo, you can't be Pope and head of a world city-state civic political power, right? The papacy. And yet, how is that not the exact opposite of what is stated right here in Dictatus Papae? Right? The Pope alone can use the imperial insignia. I mean, that's pretty... I can't think of a better way to deny Canon 7 of Chalcedon than that. And by the way, in the Roman Catholic Church, it got even crazier, where you had cardinals who were like cardinal prince warriors. Now, the church has warriors. We have warrior saints, but they're not cardinals. They're not bishops that are going to war. And if that ever happened, it's not supposed to happen, right? And this is just another example of the, worldly power of the papacy. Anyway, I'm going to read through these. I don't want to take up all this.
The number 9 falls well after that too.
Yeah, so let's go through these. So the number 8, number 9, that of the Pope alone, all the princes shall kiss his feet. Right? So the Pope is above all of these secular rulers, and he can depose them at will. And not just that, but he also has power over their secular dominions. And you see this, again, people who don't know, just go watch the Borgias. Go watch the Jeremy Irons Borgias. I highly recommend it. You'll see this at play. You'll see this working its way out in a drama that's loosely based on history. The Pope is the only name in the world, and this is speaking of in terms of authority. It is permitted to him to depose all the emperors if he wants to. He may be permitted to transfer bishops if he need to. So this is a far cry from the jurisdiction, limited jurisdiction of Canon 6 of Nicaea to now he's over the jurisdiction of every bishop in the world. He has the power to obtain a clerk of any church that he might wish, that he who is ordained by him might preside over another church, but may not hold subordinate position. The synod shall be... No synod can be called general without his order. Well, this is the exact opposite of Constantinople I, the very council called outside of communion with Rome that confirmed the doctrine of the Trinity based on Cappadocian theology, not Augustinian theology. That's the Trinitarian theology of the church. And Rome waited till after Pope St. Leo to accept the Second Council as ecumenical. So that doesn't even fit with history. But you'll notice that if you were to follow the logic of this, history doesn't even matter. The papacy determines what's history. The papacy determines what's natural law. That's why Francis can say that the death penalty is no longer just. It is now unjust, because the papacy is above even natural law now. Do you agree?
By the way, I found in the donations of Pepin too, we brought this up, where the Pope is not only supreme priest, but also king and ruler of the secular state. Now,
okay, so that's the beginning of the papal states, and so it is placing him above the temporal rulers.
Yeah.
Were you going to say more on that?
The date on what was the... Excuse me, let me look. The first in 754 and then 756. So remember, this is right when the Frankish... It's going to establish the Pape.
Yeah, this is the beginning of the Franco-papal power, correct?
Yeah. And
that's going to be relevant when we get to replying to some of the arguments against the Orthodox tonight, because we're going to be looking at two people. We're going to do Brian Holdsworth first, and then we're going to do Nolan Knows' 8 reasons that he's not Orthodox, and the Franco-papal issue will come back when we get to that. All right, so I'll read the rest of this, then we'll move on. Let's see. No synod can be called without him. No ecumenical council, no chapter and no book is considered canonical without him. That a sentence may be passed, that a sentence passed by him may be retracted by no one, and that he himself alone may retract it. He himself may be judged by no one. Okay, no one judges the first see. There you go. That's right there. Roman Catholics, do you see that? Okay, no man judges the first see. That is in your canon law still, as canon 1404. So And Ubi did a whole documentary on this. If you haven't watched the documentary, I'll plug that here in a minute. But here is the.
By the way, I use number 20 to get out of speeding tickets.
How do you get it? How do you get out? Let's tell us how to do that. That's a good idea.
You just quote number 20. Well, it says, obviously, and this is infallible, you can't condemn me, officer, because I appeal to the apostolic chair.
Okay. I'm going to start doing that. Yeah. All appeals can be had to the apostolic see. And by the way, why Denny critiques this at the beginning of his book. He's like, wait a minute, Rome isn't the apostolic see. Every see is apostolic. What are you talking about, right? Here is the modern canon law at the Vatican website, and you'll notice that Canon 1404 still includes that the first see is judged by no one. Now, where does the first see is judged by no one come from? Well, we're going to find out. It goes on to say that no one shall dare to condemn one who appeals to the apostolic chair. There's Father Deacon's way to get out of parking tickets or any other legal dilemmas, right?
That's right.
That to the latter referred the more important cases of every church. The Roman Church has never erred and never will err unto eternity, the scriptures bearing witness. So there is 22. There is indefectibility in proposition 22 of Dictatus Papae. And the same position, remember, Michael Lofton was saying, that's taught at the Sixth Council. In Agatho's letter, it's teaching that. And I guess he didn't realize that the very same council condemns a pope. So was Honorius indefectible? I'm curious. Did the Roman Catholics think that Honorius was indefectible? Oh, well, he was indefectible until he defected.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Goes on to say, let's see.
I'm right until I'm wrong.
Yeah, I'm basically never wrong unless I make a mistake. Let's see. The Roman pontiff, if he is canonically ordained, is undoubtedly made a saint by the merits of Peter. I'm sorry, but who actually believes this? That one is really ridiculous. And where does this come from? Oh, it's contained in the decrees of Saint Symmachus. Oh, really? What are those? Does anybody know what the Symmachian documents are?
Forgeries.
Oh, they're famous forgeries. Exactly. So you'll notice that if you go watch Ubi's video, he covered all this. I mean, this is pretty devastating too. And you realize that some of the stuff is still in Roman Catholic canon law. So they're still passing off this nonsense as if it is the case. Let's see, here's Ubi's article on this. I'll put this in the chat for you guys. Mm-hmm. This is Ubi's response to Eric Ibarra on the Symmachian forgeries. Because the Symmachian forgeries play into this, not just Dictatus Papae, but this phrase that the first see is judged by no one. So here is Ubi's article on that, and I'll include it in the show description as well. There's that. It's funny how was if the first see is judged by no one, how was Honorius, the occupant of the first see, judged and declared a heretic? I mean, this is just all right. So we got one or two more. What was the last couple ones? By the Pope's consent, it may be lawful for subordinates to bring accusations, that he may depose and reinstate bishops without any synod, that he who is not at peace with the Roman Church is not Catholic. Did you see that? So if you're not in communion with Rome, you cannot be saved. And that's exactly what Unam Sanctum says, right? Unam Sanctum, the papal bull of, who is it, Urban, right? Says all the same stuff. So don't give me this baloney. Oh, this one doesn't count. All of these same doctrines, not every proposition, because Unam Sanctum is mainly talking about no salvation outside the church and the political authority of the papacy. So in other words, if you follow Unam Sanctum, you cannot deny the geopolitical temporal power of the Roman bishop without losing your salvation. Now, since Vatican II, the papacy no longer crowns its popes with the triple crown. And that's because this ridiculous doctrine is no longer required. Vatican II it's the opposite. It says, you have religious liberty now. You don't have to believe in the temporal power and authority of the Pope anymore. That's not a thing. Don't worry about it. We're sorry we had such a ridiculous doctrine. Oh, but by the way, doctrines don't change, and we've never erred. I mean, again, like, this is so preposterous. Like, I mean, it's like, imagine a giant problem in a system 5 years ago, and the solution to it is to say, well, we've decreed that that problem never happened, so we've solved the problem, right? Father Deacon?
Sorry, I was posting Ubi's thing too. Repeat that again.
So it would be like saying, this whole approach here is like saying, imagine we had let's say there was a big corporation, and let's say we're Enron. Okay, we're Enron, and I'm going to restart Enron. And when we get going again, we get some seed funding, and I've started the new Enron. Now, look, guys, I know a lot of you heard bad things 20 years ago when Enron collapsed, but we fixed this problem because we have altered the past, and it never happened. So the problem's fixed.
I feel like that's a better example would be the CIA. You can trust us now. All that bad stuff.
All that bad stuff we decided, and we've looked into it, and it turns out it didn't happen. So everything's good now, right?
Just like we make people go away, we made those facts go away too.
Yes, those pesky facts. Again, so I looked into this, and I think it's a thing that Adorno says, or Hegel's students claimed, and it's the idea that if the facts contradict the system, then the facts be damned, because these are people who construct a system that is unfalsifiable, and anything.
Well, remember Vogelin?
Yeah, Vogelin says the same thing, but you can't ask these questions. That's an impossible question.
And he talks about it is, he says it's a swindle. Like all of these systems,
exactly,
are Gnostic swindles, right? In which they're all facts be damned, right? And so they've got to hide the facts, right? And that's the swindle, is what they're presenting is not reality. It's not facts, but they're presenting it as reality. And there's in the systems built in the concealment, right? And yeah, exactly. So he mentions too, you deny that the facts and reality, and well, what makes yours the fact? Because I did it. So you have this kind of will to power. It's like, I made this system and I got rid of the facts. I built the operating system so you can't ask those questions. So if you want to apply that, you have this in Roman Catholicism too. It's a swindle. You're building a neo-Gnostic system in a sense that conceals and then promises on goods that it can never deliver, right? Which is every single Gnostic system that Vogelin criticizes. That's what it's doing. But it's all a house of cards.
Right, and for people to understand the Hegelian analysis, again, even if Hegel didn't actually make this quote, it doesn't matter because it's perfectly fitting to the Hegelian system, which is analogous to what we're talking about here. Obviously, the papacy is not a Hegelian system, but Hegel had this idea of everything being immanentized, the eschaton and the spirit, and the Trinity is immanentized, and Trinity or God is world process. Right, working itself out through dialectic to an imago point. So that Hegel said that is logic, that is truth, and anything that disagrees with that is therefore by definition not logical and not truth. So there's no such thing as a fact that contradicts my system, because my system is logic and truth. And that's the point that Father Deacon is making, that Eric Vogelin makes when he critiques modern scientism, is that the discourse is structured such that you cannot ask the question of what if this is false, because the system itself is truth and falsehood. So there are no questions like, well, what about truth? There is no such thing as a question about what is truth, because the system tells you what are the logical and non-logical questions to even ask. So you can't ask those questions. That's literally how it works. And it's the same way in this system, where it's like, well, there might be things that appear to contradict the papacy, but the facts, that doesn't matter. The facts be damned, right? Do you have anything to say on that before we move on?
No, go ahead. I was just looking for that quote where he mentions Hegel, but
Oh, Vogelin does?
yeah, exactly what you're
cool.
saying. Keep going. I'll just.
All right, so let's see. What do I have next? So next up, let's move past the Symmachine forgeries. We got that from Ubi. Everybody needs to read the Ubi response to Ibarra. It's, by the way, canon. This is another little interesting side note. Here's a Catholic article. Now, this is odd to me because it's almost like it's still in Roman Catholic canon law. In Roman Catholic canon law, there's still this holdover of this ancient principle that you can't be a state official in the sense of holding political office and power as a Roman Catholic cleric or prelate. So it's still in their canon law. Here is an article on that. And yet the Pope, by the way, I guess the point is that, well, he's not subject to these laws. Okay, when you read the first 7 ecumenical councils, is there any place where the Roman bishop is exempted from the canons? Absolutely not. This is a point, this is an argument we've been making for years, right? When every one of the councils has and passes canons contrary to the Vatican I view of the papacy, right? There's no, we enact these except for Rome. Oh, every bishop can be affirm new bishops together with his metropolitan 3 bishops, except for Rome. Everybody's bound by these canons except for Rome, right? Which is what they would have done if they had the Vatican I mindset. But they don't ever say that. They just pass the canons, and then sometimes the canons are disputed. But even the canons that are disputed, like Canon 28 of Chalcedon, making Constantinople number 2 after Rome, even that is agreed upon by Rome in the 9th century. Even Rome says, okay, we'll make Constantinople number 2, and the only reason they disagreed with it had nothing to do with papal supremacy, by the way. The argument from Leo at Chalcedon was that it was not appropriate to do that because Canon 6 of Nicaea gave Alexandria the 2nd place. And so Leo's argument wasn't, I'm the Pope and there is no number 2. That's not why he rejected Canon 28. It was that it was not consistent with what Nicaea said in Canon 6, that Alexandria should have the number 2 place. So the very argumentation of Leo refutes their papacy, their own papal quote mine of that. It's so stupid.
I found this, and I want to read it because it's so applicable.
Yes, please
to
do.
Papism. So Vogelin's now talking about Hegel's system, right? And the obvious question arises, exactly like the question about papal supremacy, infallibility, and these claims. How do you prove it? Well, how do you prove your position, Hegel? Hegel dispenses with the question by declaring that the truth of his view is proven if he can justify it through the presentation of the system. If, therefore, I can build a system, the truth of its premise is thereby established. That I can build a system on false premises is not even considered. The system is justified by the fact of its construction. The possibility of calling into question the construction of systems as such is not acknowledged. That form of science is the system must be assumed as beyond all question. And we're confronted with the same question in papism. How do you prove it? Well, they built the system so that you can't prove that. And therefore, it's concealed, right? What does he call it? The swindle is concealed.
Yes.
So I thought that was very applicable. In other words, it's a fancy way of saying when the facts come up, when the questions of proof come up, facts and proofs be damned, right? The system's built. And the system, because the system's there, it proves. It's theological totalitarianism, if you think about it.
And if you read this, so Canon 285.3 of the New Code of Canon Law of the Roman Catholic Church says that clerics are forbidden from holding public office when it means a share in the exercise of civil power. And of course, This came into play in the last century due to the Jesuit involvement in liberation theology and political movements. And so Roman Catholics had to figure out, well, is this violating canon law? And now if I was a Jesuit, I would just be like, excuse me, the papacy is involved in geopolitical power and is above all state powers, supposedly, in terms of medieval papacy. But that's pretty much been discarded given post-Vatican II. So again, how is this not a contradiction? How is it that we know the view of the church at Chalcedon, and then Gregory in Dictatus Papae tells us that the Pope alone can use the imperial insignia, and now canon law even today in Roman Catholic theology says, no, the Pope, clerics are not allowed to be and exercise civic power. Okay, and the only thing I can think of Roman Catholic would say to this is that, okay, but that excludes the Pope, except for the Pope. The Pope's he's always the exclusion, right? Oh, but he doesn't count. He can be the God Emperor, literally God Emperor, because he's, as Dictatus Papae says, above all temporal rulers. And again, Roman Catholics understand that this is dogmatically necessary for your salvation in 1090 and in Unum Sanctum, right, under Pope Urban. It's declared to be necessary for salvation, not just being in communion with Rome. You have to believe in the dogma of the temporal authority of Rome. Now, Vatican II no longer says that that's not dogma anymore. You don't have to believe that because it teaches religious liberty. So how is that not a change in dogma, guys? Please help me out understand this. I don't want copes. I want to know how that's not a change. Remember what Trent said? Well, there's 3 different ways you can interpret Francis saying that the death penalty is against the gospel. I thought Francis was there to give us the interpretation. Why do we need the interpretation of the interpretation? That seems to illustrate our point at the beginning of begging the question, right?
Yep.
All right, well, we can't spend forever on this boring canon law stuff. So let's move on to the issue of, all right, we got Pepin, we got donation of Constantine. By the way, if you have the rudder, it's canon 81 of the rudder, which says that clerics can't be involved in civil worldly power. And it mentions the Apostolic Canon 6, Apostolic Canon 23. It mentions the Canon 3 and 8 of Chalcedon. It mentions Canon 10 of the Seventh Ecumenical Council, Canon 11 of Carthage. No, excuse me, Canon 11 of Constantinople. No, I'm not sure what that's referring to. And Canon 18 of Carthage. So all of those are a collection of canons referring to the inability to hold public office. But in the rudder, it's Canon 81. So you can go look that up if you want to. There is a PDF of the rudder online. Let's see. Let's move to... Okay, so we're going to start with Brian Holdsworth. And I'm going to I feel like I've been talking too much, so I'm going to let Father Deacon get the first replies. Let's see. You ready to do Brian Holdsworth video?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Pull it up.
I got it right here.
Unaffiliated agnostic to a theist, to a Christian, and to eventually a Catholic Christian. I've also made some videos about why I think we should be giving more priority to our ancient heritage in the way that we incorporate aesthetic components like music and art and architecture in the way that we express our faith, which has given some people the impression that I might be more attracted to Eastern Orthodoxy if I gave it a chance. After all, I have long hair and a beard, so it just seems like a natural fit. And if I'm being totally honest, there's a lot in Eastern Christianity, especially its culture.
You just lost the debate right there.
That I do find really attractive. But like I said in one of my previous videos, where I was comparing Catholicism and Protestantism and telling the story about how I was evaluating those two things, there's a lot in Protestantism that I found really attractive as well. But that wasn't good enough for me to identify with that perspective. For me, the priority was about which one is true, and from there, I was going to do the best I could to try to pursue it.
I will give him credit because he's got the right idea at the outset of how to approach this question. It's not going to be solved by things like who has a prettier church, who's more politically based, who's got more political trads, who's got a better heritage and, you know, my family traditions. And, you know, this is the stuff that a lot of Roman Catholic trads sort of make their definitive decision based on. And I'll give Brian Holdsworth credit for realizing that ultimately it's going to come down to which position is true, not who has the most based trads, right?
Yeah, good point.
Well, I mean, do you see this where people kind of make decisions on the basis of bad reasons to become Catholic?
Oh, all the time. Like, you lost Constantinople to the Muslims, so that must mean. So, which is just, you know what, is it not any surprise? Like, you were just talking about in South America, the
The liberation theologian people?
Liberation theology, and like all these Marxist interpretations. What do they all do? They're thoroughly reductive. They reduce all the theology to simple political.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a social gospel, right? It's not a cosmic gospel. Christ doesn't really overturn death, right? This is all just about oppressor and oppressed. And
well, liberation theology exactly is the left version of what the rad trads do with, well, I'm going to be a Latin Mass trad Catholic because it's politically based.
Yes, exactly.
All right, so let's go with continue with Brian.
Based on that. Before I jump into the content of this video, I want to say how much deep admiration and respect I have for Eastern Christians, especially in light of the amount of oppression and persecution they've had to endure over the centuries. This video isn't an attempt to condemn Eastern Christianity or to establish my own supremacy as a Catholic, and nor is it an attempt to provide an apologetic for why everyone should be Catholic instead of Eastern Orthodox. I'm way too underqualified for something that ambitious.
Well, I appreciate his admitting that he doesn't really know the theology. But one thing that trad Catholics would point out to Brian Holdsworth is that if you read Vatican I, it's pretty clear that anyone who rejects Vatican I is lost. And so, according to Vatican I, the Orthodox Church is schismatic and is damned. Now, that doesn't fit with ecumenism, at least the Vatican II era ecumenism, and especially the positive attitude that Rome has at Vatican II towards not just Orthodox, but all the world religions. But we would just simply argue that's another manifestation of a contradiction in their theology. So the tensions here, I think, when people convert to Roman Catholicism, they're not aware of what's really all these tensions within the world of Roman Catholicism. And so they're oftentimes, I think you and I were talking about this, Father Deegan, beforehand. Do you find that a lot of people who convert, or we've had a few people in Discord, decide, well, I'm not going to become Orthodox, I've decided to become Roman Catholic, and they usually give the reasons why, and it's things like, I prayed a prayer and I felt better, right? Which is like what Mormons say, like the burning in the bosom, right? There was another person who said, the papacy makes it easy. It's just going to be easy. I can turn my brain off and my papacy, and that makes it all easy, right?
Oh, I remember what that one. It wasn't just it made me feel better. The person had said that they felt like they're being demonically attacked, and they prayed the Jesus prayer, and they prayed, and they didn't see them making any progress, and so they did some Roman Catholic prayers or something like that, and the demons went away. And I'm like, congratulations, the demons. And we actually see, I was talking to another priest about this, that it's like when you see the story in the gospel about the lunatic boy that's possessed. Well, they called him lunatic because the demons were causing him to go mad and have seizures and stuff on the phases of the moon. Now the demons could have affected this boy anytime, right? This person, but they decided to do it. Why? Because anything to distract you from God. They got him to believe in a superstition. So you see this in movies, right? You bring in my house is possessed, right? So they call up the New Age spiritualist, and she brings the sage and starts putting the crystals out, and the demons go away. So that must mean that New Age spiritualism's true, right? Well, the demons just convinced, the demons did their work, right? They got you to believe in a false gospel. So I just thought that was a really terrible argument. I'm like, the reason why God is allowing you to be attacked by demons, because that's how you're going to grow stronger. Whoever told you like exactly what you said? Because it's easier. Oh, I stopped having struggles, right? I found the easy religion. And so that was exactly what it was, is like the demons, she stopped struggling. So she found a religion that was easy, and that she didn't have to struggle. She found a false gospel. So the demons did their job.
All right, good point. Let's move on with him.
So instead, this is just an explanation for why I am Catholic instead of Eastern Orthodox. So after I became convinced by the claims of Christianity and the person of Jesus, I decided to try and find a church to call my own. But I quickly became confused by the disorienting variety of teachings and practices among the various denominations, and this forced me to confront the question of why these divisions exist in Christianity. So I started studying church history, and I quickly narrowed my focus between Catholicism and Protestantism. Eastern Orthodoxy didn't really register in my mind as a contender at the time for one very simple reason, which is that I'm an English-speaking white dude in a British Commonwealth country. So when people ask me why I'm not Eastern Orthodox, I get tempted to get into a theological throwdown about things like leavened and unleavened bread. But really the easiest way to answer that question is that I'm not Russian, Ukrainian, or Greek, or any other ethnicity that the Eastern churches in the city I live in serve.
Well, this is an interesting line of argument because it's, and I'm not trying to be rude to Brian Holdsworth. I don't want to make him mad. The purpose of this chat this conversation is not to critique him personally, but I mean, I have to think that it's a person who's not that familiar with Roman Catholicism, who would think that somehow Rome avoids this ethnic stuff, right? And this was the critique that Scott Hahn gave fairly recently on, I don't know, Pints with Aquinas or something, where Scott Hahn said, well, the Orthodox Church is mainly ethnic. I mean, really? Have you been to, like, Mexico? Have you been to, like, Poland? I mean, Croatia is like vehemently Roman Catholic. I mean, what would you say to this?
Yeah, exactly. So Roman Catholicism only has one ethnicity, and if you're in like the Southwest or California, different places, the majority of Roman Catholic Church are Mexican and only speak Spanish. It's Hispanic, right? Like all the masses, right? So people have got to go and find like, so how is that not a ethnic problem? Like, I don't understand. Yeah, it's really bizarre.
Well, how about we turn this argument around to, okay, so I live in a region where there's not Orthodoxy or Roman Catholicism. There just happens to be a lot of weird evangelical churches. I guess I should be that weird evangelical church. I mean, this is a bizarre argument.
Yeah, it's weird.
Would you say that's a good turning of the argument to say that?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Because he said, oh, well, I'm a Western Anglo guy, so I should choose Rome. I mean, okay, so if I'm in, I don't know,
so wherever you
Geneva,
are,
I should choose John Calvin's church. I mean,
so if I'm in southern India, then I should be Hindu. In fact, when I was at Thomas Aquinas College on undergrad.
Well, hold on. Doesn't this contradict what he just said a minute before, which is that he's going to choose the church based on what's true? But then he's saying, well, I'm going to choose the church, which is my ethnic region. Doesn't make any sense.
No. And it's funny because when the first liturgies I started going to 22 years ago, when I was at Thomas Aquinas College, I remember the Roman Catholics up there were getting upset. And when I was going to go to liturgy, one of the priests, the chaplains, grabbed me and he was like, "Don't go." I'm like, "Why?" He says, "They're the East and we're the West." He actually gave that same, and I'm like, "That's your criteria, East?" I'm like, 50-50, I'm going East. Like that's, but now I'm realizing what you're saying is that this kind of idea of you're a contradictory, hypocritical idea, because you're supposed to follow the truth, and then on the other side of their mouth they're saying, well, you should just be whatever religion your culture is or geographical location. Yeah, good point, Jay.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it doesn't fit with what he had just said a few minutes before. So let's see the next point.
Because those churches were established by those ethnicities to serve those ethnic communities. When people of certain ethnicities were migrating or immigrating to places like Western Canada, where I live, they brought their faith with them. And so often their national churches back home would send pastors to serve them in these communities. Meanwhile, and by contrast, Catholic missionaries were coming out here before anybody else. It wasn't like they were coming here to serve the needs of Roman citizens who were settling the West. They were coming out here to evangelize everyone. See, there's this universality that exists in Catholicism that.
Well, this is a misunderstanding of, number one, the numbers game is what equates to universality. And we're going to see this one come up because numbers is not what equals Catholicity or universality. There could be at times a element of numbers where we see, for example, predictions in the Old Testament that when the New Testament church arrives, one of the signs will be the conversion of the Gentile nations. But that doesn't mean that when the creed says one holy Catholic and apostolic, that Catholic therefore necessitates gigantic numbers. And there's two easy ways to disprove this. The first is St. Athanasius makes the point in his letters when most of the empire was Arian and semi-Arian. He says that they have the buildings, we have the faith. In other words, the true Catholics were those who preserved the true doctrine and did not have the buildings. And every Sedevacantists knows that because it's one of their champion phrases. But it's not true because Sedevacantists hold it. It's true because St. Athanasius said it at a time when there was only about 4 or 5 bishops left in the Roman Empire who hadn't capitulated to Arianism and semi-Arianism. Likewise, St. Maximus famously said, if the whole of the Catholic world turns to monothelitism or monoenergism, I will remain amongst the small band of Catholics who retain the truth. So Catholicity is not numbers, first and foremost, it's fullness of the faith. And that might fall down to a couple bishops in the world who have the fullness of the faith, according to St. Athanasius or St. Maximus. So it is not a numbers game, and those two examples in periods of church history prove that.
Also, he did have a dialectical opposition, either or fallacy of, well, the Roman Catholic missionaries came out only to serve everybody by missionizing, right? And not a group that comes out. Well, and Orthodoxy doesn't do that. Well, wait a minute, it does both, right? So if you're coming from a country, why wouldn't you, and there's a group of people, why wouldn't you send a priest to pastor them? Does that mean that therefore, if I do that, I can't do the other thing and do missionary work? We certainly know that, Saint Tikhon, Saint Herman, Saint Innocent, right? What did they all do? Yeah, the evangelization
Mission work.
Yeah, of Alaska. So then it must simply come down to exactly what you said, Jay. Well, it's not that you don't do that, but you don't have the numbers. Oh, it's the numbers now. So that's what makes you Catholic.
Actually, like a majority of Roman Catholic apologetics tends to boil Catholicity down to numbers. This is very bizarre, ahistorical, ridiculous argument. It's obviously not about numbers and just the mere point about Athanasius and Maximus prove that. And we can give more examples when the church was at a low period and true believers were in the minority. So again, just ignorant of kind of basics of church history in this regard. But let's see, what's his next point?
Doesn't really exist in Eastern churches. For me to become Eastern Orthodox, I would have to join a church with a very specific ethnic and national identity that isn't my own. And that's what's so immediately peculiar about the Eastern Orthodox churches. See, they derive their religious authority from the original churches that were established in metropolitan areas like Antioch or Alexandria or Jerusalem. But why would I, an Edmontonian in Alberta, Canada, submit to the authority of a patriarch from one of those metropolitan areas unless their authority was universal?
So he doesn't understand that universality has nothing to do with the origin of the sea. So, I mean, does he think that so in other words, the argument is, well, if I go to Greece, or if I go to Russia, or if I go to Canada, or if I go to California, I'm guaranteed Catholicity because it's a papal church. So in other words, the papacy in his mind is what grants Catholicity, when this is ridiculous, because if that's the case, then where was Catholicity when Rome fell into heresy, right? When Rome was heretical under Pope Vigilius, when Rome was heretical under Pope Honorius, did Catholicity cease to be? I mean, this is not what Catholicity is. Catholicity is not primarily one's positional relation to Rome. And you can see that from St. Ignatius. If you were to just read St. Ignatius, how does he define Catholicity? The church is where the bishop is, not the Bishop of Rome, where the bishop is. And in the Discord this week, we had Roman Catholics in the Discord taking the quote from Ignatius saying the church is where the bishop is, and saying, oh, he's talking about the Pope. The bishop there is the Pope. Just preposterous. Like, this is what they do. It's like a next level. It's like what Protestants do. Like, they take the Bible text, and it's like, oh,
well, that's what it means. Yeah, it means this.
And transcended the borders of such a jurisdiction. But the problem is, that's exactly what they argued against in the original schism of East-West.
Well, the irony is that, does he not realize that the canons of the councils from Nicaea all the way up to the 7th consistently talk about the national churches and their representation and the bishoprics and sees in terms of Rome, Alexandria, Antioch, and then what gets put into that is Constantinople second, and then Cyprus is granted autocephaly at Ephesus. So did the Roman Catholics not realize that Ephesus granted churches autocephalous, that is independent status? How does that exist if the Pope has universal jurisdiction? There's nothing in there about, oh, well, you have autocephalous status except for the Pope. And this is what they always argue. Well, they just knew, everybody knew that, so they didn't have to put it in there. This is an argument from silence. This is literally what Ibarra and people say. Well, they didn't have to say you were autocephalous except for Rome because everybody knew it. I mean, this is the level of what we deal with these people. Did you want to say something about that? I mean,
it's ad hoc. It's another perfect example of that response is not a teaching of the Roman Catholic Church. You literally just made it up to save yourself in the argument.
Wait, which thing?
The reason why they didn't mention it is because everybody knew it.
Oh, yeah, that's Ibarra's favorite thing. Everybody knew it was the case. They didn't have to put it in there. Oh, okay. So all of these councils enacting canons that contradict Vatican I, and everybody just knew it.
Why can't we just say that? Well, everybody just knew.
Yeah, I mean, can we not? Yeah,
whatever
exactly.
my position is, and they didn't have to mention it.
Let's just flip it and say, oh, well, okay, my argument is everybody knew that Rome didn't have that, so they didn't have to say it. But in fact, the argumentation actually supports our side because those councils are passing canons that contradict Vatican I. And Ibarra's over here arguing they all knew it and it was assumed, when they're the same people who knew that and assumed that are passing canons that contradict Vatican I and papal supremacy. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
When the division of East and West was escalating, the Eastern contingent was arguing that these original ancient churches, or pentarchies, because of their ancient origin as being established by the earliest missionaries and apostles, that they didn't have authority over one another. That they
By the way, they didn't argue that pentarchy was established by the apostles, right? Pentarchy is what evolves out of canonical privileges. It's not an apostolic thing. I don't know. And Roman Catholics all think that pentarchy is like a five-headed papacy that we have, right? There was no pentarchy in the 3rd century. There's no pentarchy at Nicaea.
Isn't that weird?
It's just silly. It's just totally ignorant of church history. Yeah. Nicaea mentions in Canon 6, 3. So would that be a triarchy? So it's not a pentarchy until much later in church history. And by the way, there's nothing special about it being a pentarchy. It could turn into a quadrarchy. It could be a triarchy. You could have all of them fall away. Because if it didn't exist in the 2nd century, okay, there was no special patriarch in the 2nd century, except for perhaps Rome or Alexandria. You could argue that Rome and Alexandria were patrine and therefore apostolic, right, in that sense of honor, and Antioch. So you could have 3 there from the very beginning, but there's no pentarchy at the beginning. And if you read Romans 11, where Paul says that Rome can be grafted out, which as Orthodox we think Rome is grafted out, it's no longer part of that, then it doesn't. There's no magic number 5 that like, oh well, if you have the 5, there could be none of them. You could have all of those bishops apostatize, and the church can still exist.
Do you mind if I grab something to drink real quick?
No.
You do mind?
No, I don't mind. I'll go ahead with Brian here.
He's using his infallible magisterium to declare. Thanks.
So in fact, I did have a little bit of an experience with an Orthodox church right around the time when I was becoming Catholic. At that time, I had just moved out and was living in the city for the first time away from home. And there was a Ukrainian Orthodox church. It actually was a cathedral right in the neighborhood where I lived. It was literally like a block away. And so I thought, maybe I'll go check it out. And so this one afternoon, I just walked in there and I was greeted by some of the people that worked there. And I asked them if it would be possible for someone like me to participate in the liturgy or to come and pray there from time to time. Their reaction was that they just looked at me like they didn't understand why an inquiry like this was coming from someone who wasn't already Ukrainian and already Orthodox. And I don't really remember how that brief and awkward exchange ended, but I remember getting the sense that they were relieved that I wasn't pressing on with my inquiry. You see, they were operating with an understanding that I should have had, which was that this was a Ukrainian church for Ukrainian people. But I don't believe for a second that Jesus intended for his church to be divided by the
Yeah, so I've been to Spanish language Mexican Roman Catholic services where, as a cracker man, I did not feel welcome there.
And a Filipino. Then I went next door thinking I would find refuge, and it was Filipino.
I mean, I can't believe that he thinks this is like an argument against the... Now, I can understand that if he had a bad experience in an Orthodox church and he felt like they don't really want to convert there, that can happen. But it can also happen at any other ethnic-based church as well. And so this is just an odd... so the fact that he found another church where Anglo people were more welcoming for him to convert, okay, but you could find an Anglo-dominated Orthodox church where people are welcoming for you to convert. So, I mean, this is like...
And what does that have to do with the truth?
I thought it was about what's true. Right. Yeah. So, I mean, by his own argumentation, if the Orthodox church is true and that's all he has in his neighborhood, then that's where he should go because it's true, even if they're kind of, kind of sassy and snobby people.
Lines drawn on maps by temporal powers to express their authority. In the Bible, St. Paul says that in Jesus there is neither Greek...
Oh, wait a minute. So now he's arguing that nation states are imaginary lines on maps drawn by ad hoc national... That's not actually the case. In fact, in divine providence, we believe that when the gospel is expressed in a native people's tongue, that's not ad hoc, right? God is the one who created the nation states. If you read Acts 17, God set the boundaries of the nation states. And so in divine providence, God has appointed the rulers of the various nation states. It's not imaginary lines drawn on a map. Now, modern nation states are a post-French Revolutionary idea. That's true.
Yes.
But in terms of Matthew 28, Jesus talks about go and preach and teach the gospel to all the ethnoi, the ethnicities out there, which is the Genesis 10 table of nations. So Jesus is saying the table of nations in Genesis 10, go out and preach and convert them. And when you read the councils, you'll notice that all those councils speak of the people groups as legitimate existing people groups who have their expression of the faith in their unique cultural way. There's nothing wrong with that. That's the Orthodox view. That's the view of the 7 ecumenical councils. And there's nothing in any of that the Catholicity is guaranteed by Rome. That's what he thinks this weird function of Rome is going to do, which is to protect against ethnolatry or ethnophiletism or whatever. And all of those things are just as dangerous a temptation in any group, Protestant, Roman Catholic, or Orthodox. It's not something that's somehow unique to Orthodoxy. But they're confused because they don't realize that it's Orthodoxy that's doing things the exact same way as the first 700 years of Christianity were done. Right.
And notice they're doing exactly the same thing. They're promising something that they don't deliver on. Epistemic certitude. No ethnic boundaries. But that's not the reality on the ground, is it?
No, somebody said, did you have a bad experience at a largely Mexican Catholic parish? It was a hip-hop mass, so you tell me what you think that was.
In other words,
I'm not joking.
We're divided by things like our ethnicity, our nationality, or...
So he thinks that the divisions that exist in terms of nation states is something that the gospel was supposed to overcome, which is kind of true. But when Paul says in Galatians 3 that there's neither Jew nor Greek, he is not saying that the groups lose their identity in terms of becoming some geopolitical New World Order blob. He's saying that the gospel transcends those things, and each of these groups expresses them uniquely in their own way, which is exactly
the same argument that the wokeists.
Well, I was about to say, does he not realize that Paul says there's neither male nor female? Oh, so I guess we're supposed to be, transcending gender as well. No, I mean, this is the dumbest, lowest. I'm not saying Brian's dumb. I'm just saying that this is a liberal talking point to misquote Galatians 3 as if it's saying Paul believes that gender and nation state are all wiped away. If you look at an icon, you'll notice that everybody in their icon retains their biological historical identity because it's telling you about who they were in history. God's providence made Jesus a Hebrew in history to fulfill the promises. And so Jesus isn't an Asian man. Jesus is not a black man. That's why we don't do the Jesuit paintings of Jesus as every ethnicity. It's a lie. Iconography teaches history. Iconography is not symbols, it's reality. This is what people don't understand.
Otherwise, it would be Gnostic.
It is Gnostic.
Or gender. In Jesus, we are all one. The church is universal. When I first started looking for a denomination or...
So this is just a denial of the principle of the one, the many. The fact that we are all one in Jesus is not an erasing of the many particulars that we have. It doesn't erase my masculinity. It doesn't erase the fact that I'm an annoying Anglo dude, right? It doesn't erase any of that. I will never escape that because that's what in divine providence I was created to be, you see. And so it's just weird sort of way out their argumentation, which just look at an icon and merely looking at the icons would teach you the truth to refute this error.
Church to embrace. My primary concern was with trying to distinguish.
Did you ever wonder why this became what dogs eat for every meal? In 1860,
his primary concern became trying to figure out what dogs ate. That was an ad.
The original one that Jesus had established himself. And so with that came an assumption that I should look for the one that hasn't compromised or changed essential truths. So when I started researching church history, and especially these divisions that have taken place over the centuries, a point of contention that was common to all of these divisions was authority. So in the East-West schism,
and I want to pause because you'll notice this one will always come up because, and I don't mean this to denigrate Roman Catholics, but it's a tendency I see in Roman Catholics, which is to worship authority. They will say basically that the papacy is, more or less the voice of God on earth, right? If you watch the Borgias, you'll see Alexander operating this way. Like he'll just sort of blurt out when people disagree, but I am the voice of God on earth, right? You'll do what I say because I'm, Alexander the Sixth. I'm the voice of God on earth, and I quite literally, like, this is the critique that you get in Saint Justin Popovich. Like when he critiques the papacy as sort of the telos of European Renaissance humanism, of man worship. The papacy is the greatest expression of this man worship because it's the worship of authority. I was going to pull that book out, but I don't see it. Did you want to say something?
No. Go ahead.
Right, so in Orthodox Faith and Life in Christ, some of the best chapters. This is a necessary book. Everybody should have this book because he critiques natural theology and he explains why, as Orthodox, we don't do Roman Catholic, Thomistic natural theology. But he goes through, in the first few chapters, humanistic education. Humanistic versus theanthropic education. And he talks about differing values between Orthodox and European man. And then he talks, notice that his chapter isn't about first the papacy. What is his chapter titled? The Infallibility of European Man.
Wow.
And so the papacy, he argues, is this manifestation of what we're seeing. Remember Dictatus Papae, guys. How was that speaking? How did that view the office of the papacy? Supposedly, remember when Jesus said, you shall not have it amongst yourselves like it is amongst the Gentiles? Like, who's the greatest amongst you? You shall not be that way. That's how the Gentiles operate. The very opposite of what the papacy does. The papacy is above all emperors in the world. And so this whole chapter is about how the papacy is really the end goal of European Renaissance humanism. And he's not the only person to notice that. Philip Sherrard, in his book Church, Papacy, Schism, makes this exact same point about how the papacy is the result of theological errors, such as the filioque and the dialectical process of filioque and relations of opposition in the triad. All of these things have a result in the practical world, right? So when you see Dictatus Papae, it's not just randomly rich papal guys wanting power. There's a theological, spiritual delusion involved in this, which is at work in history that comes to fruition with papal supremacy in the late Middle Ages. It works up to like a tipping point, and this is what gives birth to Reformation. That doesn't mean I'm saying the reformers were good people, right? They can both be bad. What do you think about this idea of authority worship and the papacy?
I think it's exactly. I mean, it's going to tie. Like, I'm trying to think if I just jump into it right now, but it's a type of kind of almost another kind of instance of mechanism, right?
Can you flesh that out? What do you mean?
Well, in terms of kind of like formulas and mechanisms, right, that are really the antithesis of the human experience. Because I was even thinking in the terms of the epiclesis, right, that we do. What do Roman Catholics argue about? At what exact point in the epiclesis does the bread and wine become the body and blood of Christ? But if you watch what's going on in the liturgy and the epiclesis, it's a conversation, right? It's a relationship between the priest and God and calling down. So it's not some magic formula. Oh, when I say it just like this, at this moment, the Holy Spirit descends, and at that precise. Do you see that that's anti-human? It's machine. Do you see that a worship of authority is not human? It's machine. It's mechanistic, right? Do you see that the system of theology and salvation in Roman Catholicism is not a human relational salvation and theology. It's a machine. It's algorithms. You have this.
Yeah, well, it's
constant
the
thing
exact.
going
Just
through.
think about the indulgence system in the Middle Ages, which is still technically there, which is that you are paying off the debts that you've accrued in terms of temporal punishments. And so throughout your life, your sins have accrued, I don't know, 50,000 days in purgatory, literally. And
What
so,
did somebody say? It's they do believe imputed Protestant imputed reformers imputed righteousness is called indulgences.
well, they do. It's just that it's that's just for the temporal punishments. All right. So let's say you've I don't know, you pinched a bunch of butts throughout the week, and you've accrued, 5 mortal sins that you go to confess in the confessional. So the 5 mortal sins have merited eternal punishment and temporal punishment. And so when you go to confession, you are absolved in the Roman Catholic system via the priest giving you absolution, but you're not absolved necessarily from the temporal punishment. So he's absolved you from the eternal debt. Now you do the penances to pay, I'm not joking, to literally to pay the temporal punishments. So the 5 butt pinches probably accrued, I don't know, 5,000 days in purgatory. So you're not going to go to hell, but you will spend 5,000 days in purgatory. So you're going to say, I don't know, 5 rosaries to make up for the 5 butt pinches. Now
Imagine if we did this, Jay, in our
this
marriage.
is the machine. Look, this is the machine transaction you're talking about.
Yeah, and think about what this would do to our marriage if we did that. If I told my wife, you because of your actions, you incurred 5 demerits, and the only way that you can pay that off is by 10 meals prepared. Right.
Yes, wife, you have contracted 5 demerits this week for putting the toilet seat down and for burning my food. You now have to pay me 5. How would you contract this? Imagine if you wrote it up like a contract with your wife, and you'd be like, wife, you must sign this contract and fix me 5 special meals to pay for the 5 infractions.
And then you could even make your own calendar where it shows each day what the penances she has to do.
Yes, it's literally this way, especially if you read these classic trad approaches. It's so crazy if you read books like This Is the Way, which is a typical SSPX style catechism that I usually use as to explain this. There's this awesome section in here where he says that servile work, right? This is my favorite section because he talks about what's the definition of servile work on the Lord's Day? Because he says that if you do too much servile work, it's a mortal sin on the Lord's Day. So how do we know when we've done that? Well, he says, I can help you out. Here's the allowed activities. You can engage in 3 hours of work that is extra, that is a lot of arduous, he says. 2.5 hours of such arduous work would constitute a mortal sin. So if you do 2 hours of arduous work on a Sunday, it's a venial sin. Once you get past that 2 hour up into the 2.5 hour mark, then it's arduous. And he even goes on to talking about how long if you walked. So if it's a Lord's Day and it's a Sunday and I'm supposed to engage in leisure and rest, what if I walked 3 miles? Oh, that's a mortal sin. This is how ridiculous this stupid system is.
Or a centimeter over. And it's the joke that I always make about the Jehovah's Witnesses who believe literally 144,000 will be saved. And we do a skit where it's like the Jehovah's Witness gets up and he's the 144,001. It's like, you almost.
Yeah.
But anyways, my whole point was, if we had this kind of mechanicalism, legalism, it would destroy relationships.
Well, that's why the Roman Catholic Church did destroy the relationship between the people and God. And so people misunderstand that. They think I don't hate Roman Catholics. I don't like the system and the papacy. I love the Roman Catholic people. I had a great time talking to Tim Gordon. I don't hate Tim Gordon. I think he's a cool guy. I want the best for Tim Gordon, genuinely. But I don't believe that this system helps people or gives them what it claims to give. All right, let's continue with Brian's thing. I think we're getting close to about halfway through his thing.
Yeah, the question was the authority of the Pope versus the authority of other bishops and patriarchs. In the Protestant Reformation, the question was the authority of the Pope again versus the exclusive authority of Scripture. And then in the English Reformation, it was again the authority of the Pope versus the authority of the King. So as you might guess, authority, how it's derived and where it resides, is a pretty essential component of the faith. So as I looked at all these various divisions, in my effort to distinguish which is the OG church that Jesus himself established, one of the assumptions that I maintained throughout it all was that whatever existed before each division should still continue to exist after. So if there's this break apart of two denominations, which of them still looks like it did before, and which of them no longer looks like it claims to have been?
Isn't that our argument?
Division?
I mean, has this person not visited Vatican II churches? I mean, clown masses. I mean, who looks like the church of the first 1,000 years? I mean, only a person who reads a papal history of the first 1,000 years could be duped into thinking the church of the first 1,000 years is the papal church, right? What do you say to that?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I said. It's like that's our argument. It's like, just take a look. So, and I want to get into it now, but it brings up some interesting. It's not like a lot of things. It's not just, let's just look at the facts, right? Let's just look at the evidence. But there's some psychological and other presuppositions that are, I mean, how could somebody miss this? Right?
Well, this is typically the kind of argumentation of a person who, as he admitted himself, was relatively new to church history, right? So, when I was, and I'm not being rude or condescending to him, when I was 21 and I started reading about church history, I fell into, because I didn't know, how to even study history at that time. I was still an undergrad in history, and I hadn't had sort of upper level research classes on how to do research. I fell into this mistake of like, I just grab a book from, some Roman Catholic guy, maybe it's even an 1800s Roman Catholic book. Like I've got, one of the first ones I read, I was talking about this on a couple streams ago, was Cardinal Gibbon's famous book, Faith of Our Fathers, right? This is one of my first Roman Catholic books I read when I was 21. And, Cardinal Gibbons goes through and gives a basic history of the Roman Catholic Church and arguments for it. And, he wrote this in, I think, the 1870s. This was written in 1876. By the way, this is from 1890s copy I have. But, I didn't realize that. You realize that's dated scholarship, right? Like, this is going to be citing forgeries, just like the Canon of Trent cites forgeries, which the Vatican admits are forgeries, guys. That's why you can't just pick up some random book and, that one's going to be a great approach, right? Because it's old, it's going to be faithful. It doesn't really work that way, right? I mean, look at Father Francis Dvornik's book, he's one of the most famous uniates of the last century. This is the book that rehabilitated Saint Photius for Roman Catholicism. So you're talking about somebody who was considered a heretic for centuries, has been rehabilitated by this book for the uniates, and now Rome says, he's cool now. He's a saint now. That's cool. You can revere him as a saint, even though, we said he was a heretic for centuries, but he's cool now because, Father Dvornik showed that he's cool now. But do you see how this is demonstrating the point that when Roman Catholics are new to Roman Catholicism, they don't know any of this. They just think, I'm just going to go with this because it's easy. And what I detect throughout Brian's presentation here in this video is that this is the ease and simplicity route.
Yes, I was just going to say that.
All right, I'll keep going. Do you have anything to say, or I'll keep going with him?
Keep going.
So in the case of the East-West Schism, there was a number of controversies that they were stuck on, but the most significant one seemed to be the disagreement about the authority of the Bishop of Rome, or the Pope, versus the authority of the other bishops and patriarchs. Rome was insisting that the Bishop of Rome had a unique and universal authority over the entire universal church, whereas the eastern side of the controversy was trying to maintain this idea that the Bishop of Rome was a first among equals, which was like an honorific title, but that it didn't actually express any kind of supremacy of authority over the rest of the
Can you
bishops.
stop it?
So that was their positions going.
Where does he think this debate's actually take? When and where does he think this debate's actually taking place? He just throws it out.
I got distracted by a comment in the chat. I was trying to get a link. What did he say? Can you repeat what you're honing in on?
Well, he seemed to suggest that one of the divisions was over the place of the Pope, and that those in the West and Rome were arguing for papal supremacy, and we were arguing for primacy of honors. Well, he just throws this out, but he doesn't tell, like, where do you think this is taking? What is that exact argument?
I think he was talking about at the time of the schism. So, I mean, earlier he had said the time of the schism. So I'm guessing that's where he's placing this.
Into the controversy. So how true were they to those positions after it actually led to a deep division and a schism? Well, the West continued to maintain this idea that the Bishop of Rome had a unique and universal.
So he thinks it's before. Do you hear that?
Sorry, what?
It seems to me like he's suggesting that it was like had been going on for a while. But anyways, go.
Universal church. But the East did not continue to treat the Bishop of Rome as a first among equals. In fact, they excommunicated him, which to me seems like a pretty clear contradiction of what they were arguing in the first place, which was that no autocephalous patriarch, that's like the original patriarchs, had authority over one another. So how
does he realize that autocephalous is in the councils? I mean, he just admitted autocephalous churches, which itself is an argument against the Vatican I view of the papacy, right? If you read Ephesus, when it grants autocephaly, it doesn't say anything about, except for Rome. You're still under Rome. Nobody else can interfere in your jurisdictions except for Rome. None of that's ever there. And other churches are also accorded autocephalous status later on. And never is there any of this, except for Rome. But it was understood. We all knew it. Everybody knew it. Oh, okay. Well, then I can just argument from silence. Nobody knew it because it wasn't there.
Can any of them excommunicate one of the other ones? And then as time went on, the Patriarch of Constantinople inherited the title first among equals. In closing, I want to give some consideration for what God's perspective, or God's role in all of this.
So that wasn't really an argument. That was just like talking about the most generic overview of the schism. So he didn't even really present an argument there.
Might be.
It's your last chance to shop Wayfair's Cyber Week. Save on kitchen and dining furniture up to 50% off. Bedroom furniture.
When I was considering the controversy or the claims between Catholicism and Protestantism, one verse in the Bible that really stood out to me and touched me quite personally was Jesus' prayer for Christian unity in the Gospel of John in chapter 17. See, this is his last prayer that he's making right before he's arrested and then sent off to be tried and crucified. So, as you might guess, this is something that stands out in the Gospels and in the Bible, and is one of those things that we should be giving a lot of priority to. In it, Jesus prays for unity among his disciples.
Yeah, well, Brian's 4 years into Roman Catholicism now. I wonder how that honeymoon of unity is going. Is he imagining that the unity that he thought the papacy would deliver? I wonder if he thinks it's really been delivered with what Francis does every week.
And his church, and that he believed that this would be a sign of his divinity to the entire world if his people were able to remain one. And so if we look at the history of East and West, whichever one seems to reflect that priority, I would think is going to be the one that's most correctly following in Jesus' footsteps. And from what little I know of the church's history, and especially the East and West schism, it seems to me that the West has always been the one extending that olive branch. We saw it early on in the councils of Lyon and Florence, where...
So because the councils of Lyon and Florence offered reunion, they're the good guys that are offering the olive branch. I mean, this is just such a...
Well, remember when we were reading through the Council of Florence Forenza, and what they would do? They would say, "Oh yeah. What was one of the agreements? We'll admit that there's monarchia, right? That's not, that there's only one cause." And then once they kind of got them to, like, the East to commit, what did they do? Oh, we revoked that, and you have to kiss the ring of the Pope, and you have to do...
Yeah, I mean, it's just totally like, read Ostromov's book, The History of the Council of Florence, and you'll get a good picture as to what was really going on, the political motivations, and all this kind of stuff. And I guess he's not realizing that. I mean, again, Father Dvornik's book is what rehabilitated Photius and these so-called schismatics, right? So you realize that Rome has, through this book, basically conceded the Eastern arguments throughout this turbulent schism time. And this is huge because all of these people who don't know about modern 20th century Roman Catholic scholarship and all of the concessions and interest in Eastern theology that's happened, especially after Vatican II, with people like von Balthasar, with Dvornik and others, they're not realizing that that's all a concession to all the arguments that the East was making for hundreds of years. And so they don't even know any of this, right? They're new to the game. And I'm not trying to knock Brian, because I remember being in exactly the same position Brian was in. When I was 21, it was right where he was at. I was starting to read basic Catholic apologetics versus Protestant arguments. And you think, well, it has to be the easy way, right? But what's the problem, Father Deacon, in terms of, well, why wouldn't the easy way be the right path here? Because it just makes it simple. I mean, isn't that kind of an indicator that that's what God would give us?
No, this question came up with was it a Protestant I can remember that said, if God desires all to be saved, why does he make it so hard to be saved? Why can't these things be clear? Well, it's not an either or. I mean, if salvation's about acquiring the virtues, right? That's a hard process. And as you remember, we pointed out with the Wood book, with virtue epistemology, that people born with gifts like talented musicians, photographic memory or something like that, those aren't virtues because they never had to work at them. So God wants us to be saved, but being saved is the process of theosis, that is acquiring the spiritual virtues, all the spiritual virtues that Christ had. And so the way is not easy. The path is narrow, right? And so it should be, if somebody's promising you something easy, isn't this exactly the exact temptation of the devil? He says something true to Adam and Eve. You'll be like God. Well, wait, isn't that true? You're supposed to be like God, but you don't have to work at it, CJ. You could just take this pill. You could just do this. You can just sign on the dotted line. Let's just sign the contract.
This is a great point. Yeah, this is a really great point.
So usually when somebody promises you the easy path, we know who gives that same answer. That's the devil. So it's like, no, I want to choose the hard path. And, I even thought about this in terms of palliative care, that everybody's like, I just want to die comfortably. Like, I don't want to die in pain, right? I was to be drugged out of my mind and stuff like this. And then you hear these stories about very holy Orthodox people who choose not to be doped up. They say, my last hours, I want to be in my right mind. This is my last struggle. This is the last thing that I can give to God. And whereas the world's like, why should you have to do that? Why don't we just, what are they doing in Canada? Physician assisted suicide. I just found out California actually has passed. It's not physician-assisted suicide, but it's now legal for you to take your own life.
Well, and also, I mean, a lot of this stuff, and this is another reason why I try to warn people and say this stuff. People think I'm just trying to be mean or whatever. The papacy wrecks a lot of people's faith. Okay, this causes a lot of people to become atheists, just like Protestantism is an atheism factory. Francis is also an atheism factory. It's true Francis sends a lot of people to Orthodoxy, but I mean, there's prominent Catholics. I'm not going to name anybody, but who. I was looking at somebody who was a prominent trad Catholic not too long ago, who now his Twitter is all secular stuff, and he's basically like, I'm not doing this anymore. And he had been struggling with whether he believed in it anymore, I think a year ago, and now apparently he doesn't. So I'm not calling him out, but I tried to reach out to him, and of course he blew me off and said I was whatever. But it's not like, I mean, these systems that are not correct damage people is what I'm trying to say. And the people that go into trad world, I've watched them for 20 years. I was in that world. It leads to people becoming alcoholics. It leads to people becoming suicidal. It leads to people in serious delusion, or they just leave. Well, I've seen a lot of people when they go into the craziness of trad land, they just quit. I'm like, I'm done. I'd rather not be involved in any of this. I'm not saying that about Brian or any of these people, but I'm saying that that's why I'm saying this stuff, is not to hurt people, but try to explain to you that this system is not going to give you what it promises you.
And I always like to bring it back that salvation, everything that I've been talking about tonight, from the epiclesis, the worship of God, our theology, to salvation itself, is relational. Remember, we always start with personhood first and relationship. And I was just thinking, and God gives us marriage to save us, right? We're saved through, if you're a man, you're saved through your wife, and if you're wife, you're saved through your husband. Now, what if somebody told you, and it's to give us an idea about the way that we relate to God. Now, what if somebody told you, you know what? What if I could promise you a really easy marriage? Why does this have to be all complicated? Just a couple bullet points. She'll only say these things and do that, and you don't have to worry about anything. It'll provide certainty. And do you think that would be good for you? Do you think that's ultimately what somebody should actually desire in a spouse?
Yeah, well, it would be like, I mean, they're going to push, like, let's say the robot companions, right? So let's say you want to, I don't want an actual human being because I don't want to deal with her. I just want a programmed, SEX bot that will sort of be my maid and my, whatever. I mean, that's not going to help you in any way. And it's also not going to fulfill you. You weren't made to be paired up with a robot. And the same application to what you're saying is like, that's not going to do anything for you. In fact, that's going to harm you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we're almost done with Brian. Let's finish up.
The West hosted all the major bishops from the East to discuss all these theological controversies and the divisions. And what ended up happening is that the Eastern bishops, all except for one, conceded and signed off on the controversies, and Rome's...
Yeah, so that's the one bishop at Florence. That's not throughout the whole world. So I don't know where they think that all of the Orthodox bishops in the world were at Florence. I mean, it's like, what? And here's the weird part. Roman Catholics, did you guys not know that St. Mark of Ephesus is hallowed as a saint by the Uniates and by your church? Do you not see how this is inconsistent? The very guy who you're talking about being one of these people who opposed Florence, St. Mark of Ephesus, to the Orthodox, one of the pillars of Orthodoxy, considered a heretic for centuries by your church, and now he's cool. Your church evolves. It changes dogma, clearly.
Position on things like papal supremacy, the filioque, and purgatory. And what ended up happening is that when the Eastern bishops went back home, they succumbed to political pressure to not honor that new unity that they had signed onto. It seems to me that Rome has always been the initiator of ecumenical dialogue. It was the First Vatican Council in which the mutual excommunications.
Right. So the word ecumenical comes from the universal oikumene of the Imperium. So, first of all, no, Rome has not always initiated ecumenical dialogue, because the first 8 ecumenical councils are called by the emperor. They're not called by the Pope. So the very calling of the councils by emperors shows that the Dictatus Papae claimed that no councils are ecumenical unless they're convoked and affirmed by the Pope was not the view of the first 700 years of the church. 800, 900. So ecumenical has nothing to do originally with the papacy. It's only by the time of Dictatus Papae that now ecumenical councils require the papacy, and that's what makes them ecumenical. Nobody ever argued that before that. Yes, there was the desire to get as many bishops and important sees signed off, and certainly Rome, as the first among equals, they wanted Rome to sign off on that. Yeah, but that is not equate to what you're trying to argue here, to what he's trying to. They always try to they'll make these leaps. It's like Rome was first, therefore Vatican I. Peter keys, therefore Vatican I. Right? It's a non sequitur, right? I mean, none of these things that they cherry pick prove the Vatican I position, and that's why the Roman Catholic Church typically had to argue that Vatican I was an evolution. But Satis Cognitum, written around the time of Vatican I, says it's not an evolution, that it was always the case.
Of East and West were lifted, and then it was the second Second Vatican Council in which ecumenism was made a high priority for the Church, and this paved the way for the joint theological commissions of East and West. It was Pope John Paul II and Pope Benedict who both respectively recited the Nicene Creed with Eastern patriarchs without the filioque. And it was the Bishop of Rome who...
Like, what is that supposed to prove? So because they were willing to do that, they're the good guys? Like, what does that have to do with which... Does he not realize that none of that has anything to do with which position is true or false? Which is how he began this video, right? That he's going to follow truth. Like, none of these things prove the position either way.
First visited the East. It wasn't until 1995 that the Patriarch of Constantinople visited Rome. Lastly, I wonder if there's any providence in the fact that the East has suffered so much decline over the last millennium.
Has he not noticed the decline in the numbers since Vatican II? I mean, this cuts both ways. That they love to do these readings of providence, like, oh, this was a providential, right? Because when Byzantium fell to Islam, did that not realize that it fell after the union with the Roman Catholics? It fell after the union.
Yeah.
What do you say to these kinds of arguments that they love to do? Like, well, providence has shone upon Orthodox because you guys were all under Muslim dominance and we flourished. Oh, really? What about when Rome? What about when the papacy, when Pius IX was walled up in his Vatican under a revolutionary government? What about?
Well, then that's when they switch it. Oh, well, the persecution.
The persecution now proves the church.
Now proves the.
They'll say too that all the PEDO priests and all of that is proof that the Roman Catholic Church is a true church because it's the devil persecuting the church.
See, it's always
unfalsifiable.
Yeah, so we should just say, I like that principle. We'll use that. We'll take that argument whenever something's in decline. Obviously, that's persecution, proof that we're true, and whenever we succeed, that's obviously proof that we're true.
Of the 5 original episcopal sees of the Roman Empire, only Rome is the one who has continued to enjoy safety and prosperity. Constantinople fell to the...
Has he not seen the decline in everything in the Roman Catholic world in the last 60 years? So why is he not going to interpret that as a sign of God's disfavor? I mean, does he not realize that every trad Catholic interprets the decline, the drastic collapse in Europe and in America in Roman Catholic church attendance, in Roman Catholic nuns, priesthood, all of that, all of the curse of the PEDO stuff, all of the 60+% of the Roman Catholic priests that are Skittles, Most people estimate anywhere from 50 to 60%, maybe even more, of the Roman Catholic priests are Skittles. None of that is a sign of God's disfavor. Do you see how arbitrary it is to take historical events and interpret them as God's favor or disfavor? Isn't this what the Pharisees did when the Pharisees said, "Oh, this man is cursed. He's blind because he has God's disfavor, and so his parents did something wrong." This is the very attitude of the Pharisees. What do you think?
Yes, I think it's true. Go.
Alexandria was conquered by the Arabs. Antioch was completely devastated, and Jerusalem was also conquered by them.
Okay, so Rome fell to the barbarians in 400, 410. I mean, this is just ridiculous. Does that not signify God's disfavor? I mean, the papacy goes to France for 70 years, Avignon, and there's 3 people claiming to be the Pope. Is that God's disfavor? No, that's God. That's proof that Satan's persecuting the church and we're the true church. This is this is the hermeneutics of arbitrary history. To anything that happens is interpreted as the blessing and the persecution of the Roman Catholic Church.
Rome had existed with the threat of Islamic invasion at several points, and one of the most severe was in the Battle of Lepanto, where the Roman, we'll call it the Roman army, but it wasn't just Rome, but like sort of the Christian fleet was outnumbered 3-1 by the Ottoman fleet, and by some miraculous intervention, they ended up being victorious over the Ottomans. Now, I'd hate to impose that providential interpretation on this dichotomy between East and West.
But that's what you just did.
Does repeatedly describe seasons of prosperity and strength.
Yeah, so political advantage and wealth and temporal gain are the proofs of the Roman Catholic Church being blessed and the Orthodox Church being. But, I mean, does he not realize that after the Union Council that he's talking about, that's before Byzantium fell? So why can't I just say that Byzantium fell because of Florence? I mean, this is so.
And by the way, these are the same silly arguments that Job's friends made. Obviously, God doesn't favor you. Look what's happening to you.
Yeah, you have a bunch of boils on your skin, so God's cursed you. I mean, this is so stupid. By the way, again, his own theologians I'm so glad that I finally got around to getting this book by Yves Congar, 900 Years Together, right? After 900 years, the background to the schism between the East and the West. Another one of these texts, like Dvorak's Phocian Schism, which is vindicating all of our takes. So he doesn't even realize that the key theologians of Vatican II and of his church are admitting all of our points. Anyway, that's the. I don't mean this to be mean, but I want to ask, doesn't it seem like, Father Deacon, that the strength of the Roman Catholic apologetic is in getting new people and low information people and low tier argumentation, which appeals to a mass audience? It seems to be the strength of that argumentation.
I think so, because they are an unsophisticated argument. Again, we don't mean to be mean or anything like that, and can understand like first coming in and it being confusing and stuff like that, and especially with not being given all the kind of wealth of knowledge and jewels that you find in the Orthodoxy, that you give a very superficial kind of a straw man version. Really, it seems like that he was presented. I'm trying not to like blame him or find fault that he made that decision. What if you were given a straw man of Orthodox and you're like, well, it's certainly not Protestantism, and they're promising all these things that we just went over? Like, you could understand how somebody would go, well, obviously I got to become Roman Catholic, just like Trent, right? Or not Trent, what's his name? Capturing Christianity.
Oh, Cameron. Yeah, I forgot about
Cameron. Forgive me. Yeah.
Do you want to go ahead and go to Super Chats and call it a night, or do you want to go ahead and do Nolan Knows His 8 Reasons? How much energy do you have? You seem like you're getting kind of tired, so I'll leave it up to you whether you want to continue or call it a night.
Well, I just took the sleeping medication and I was good. Slowing it down. I think I could run through these real quick.
Okay, let's go through those. So Nolan knows is somebody that we've reached out to, and we're not on bad terms. We might do a stream in the future. And Nolan had written. He's a Catholic guy who does a lot of men's issues kind of stuff, patriarchy, weightlifting. Me his 8 reasons that he's not Orthodox, which I don't think it's public. I think it's on his Substack paywall. But I did have a discussion with Nolan in DMs, and he said, hey, if you want to reply to my 8 reasons, feel free to do that. It's okay. So he's also a guy who's put out a very similar kind of popular approach to rebutting Orthodox arguments, and we're going to run through these. He's got 8 basic reasons. His first argument is, I'll read this and I'll let you reply, Father Deacon. The Orthodox Church isn't one. Christ declared that his church would be one and it would be under one shepherd. But there is no agreed authority amongst Orthodox churches. There are 16 different Orthodox churches that are independent. Like all schismatics, it ended up splitting into further divisions, just as there is no united form of Protestants, so there's no Orthodox church.
Classic move of, let me define arbitrarily what unity is, and then therefore I can exclude you. We do have one shepherd, it's Christ. And it's another problem that they have with the one and the many being diametrically opposed. We can, and again, it depends on what unity means. Does unity mean supremacy?
Yeah, his argument was that presupposes that unity equals papal supremacy, right? So the one
you
shepherd,
don't have papal supremacy, so you're not united, right?
Yeah, so the one shepherd isn't Christ; it's the papacy and Peter.
Yeah, so I think that's enough to. I've heard that argument before. I think that's enough to dispute it. That that's an arbitrary standard to define unity. Something's unity if and only if it's papal supremacy. So there's no unity anywhere unless it's papal supremacy. And it really replaces and removes Christ from being that present in the church as the ultimate unity.
And of course, this falls back on every Roman Catholic themselves, because the Roman Catholic Church is definitely not united under Francis. In fact, a gigantic portion now believes Francis is either material or formal heretic and has done multiple scandalous activities, which has only furthered the SSPX versus the FSSP versus the Sedevacantists versus the Tradcat in communion with Rome versus the liberal Novus Ordo. So there's a whole swath of supposed unified Roman Catholics who all disagree with one another as to what the dogmas are. And as we pointed out in hour 1, every different Roman Catholic will give you a different list of what the infallible binding dogmas are. And so by his own criteria, his own church doesn't match up to what he requires. The Orthodox Church, go ahead.
Well, also, if this papal if unity is defined uniquely, arbitrarily so, is papal supremacy, and that's supposed to preserve the faith and doctrine, then as you had the Pope point out, was it Ratzinger?
Yeah, Pope Benedict, I think in one of his books, said that the Eastern Church, the Orthodox Church, has maintained the Catholic faith for the last 1,000 years.
So you have the Pope, the papacy saying you don't need the papacy to keep while people in the papacy make an argument, you need the papacy to keep unity and doctrine.
Yeah, I don't think that people realize the import of what Ratzinger admitted, and they'll always say, that doesn't count because it was his private theological writings. I don't care what the status of the document was, it's conceding our point, that the papacy isn't necessary to preserve Catholicity and Orthodox theology. Thank you. That's all we've been saying, that this office doesn't do this. And so there you have Ratzinger basically admitting that point. Number 2, the Orthodox Church doesn't claim to be infallible. There's no way of knowing what faith and morals are. Again, this is confusing epistemic certitude with the notion of external authority and normativity.
Yes. And the church does claim infallibility. What do you think councils are?
Right, and again, so by this line of argumentation, nobody knew what dogma was in the first 3 centuries. So if you lived in the year 300, there hadn't been any ecumenical councils. You most likely didn't have access to the Roman bishop. So I guess nobody in the year 300 or the year 324 knew what dogma was, right? I mean, we see Lofton was actually making this argument recently. Right, you can't know what dogma or ecumenical councils are without the Pope. Oh, okay, so how did anybody know what dogma was in the year 320?
One of the other critiques that might fall under this kind of loosely, that is their critique of orthodoxy, is, well, I can't figure out what any of you believe because every Orthodox person is saying something different. Well, I work at a Roman Catholic college. A lot of the professors there, unfortunately, are very liberal. And you know what they're all over the place on birth control, divorce, medical health, ethics, human sexuality. In fact, they say, well, Catholicism must be this kind of perennial. It must be these different expressions, right? So the trad cats are wrong on that. They're too rigid, right? Well, if you went to, and it's not just my college that I teach at, if you went to most Roman Catholic colleges and went around and asked Roman Catholic theologians and professors what's on this issue, you think you're going to get one answer? You're going to be more confused than ever, right?
Yeah, again, going back to the point we made in the first 30 minutes, every Roman Catholic will give you a different list of what the binding dogmas are because there is no infallible list. So it does you no good to have the idea that we have an infallible dogma that's binding, and then you don't know what those dogmas are.
We dealt with number 3. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I do want to add that he throws in the notion of birth control and contraception, and I'll just cite everybody the Ubi Petrus interview that he did with Dr. Bradshaw, which is really good, because Dr. Bradshaw kind of just completely demolishes this objection right there. And separate from the Bradshaw interview, Ubi also did a little documentary on this issue of humana vitae and contraception and natural family planning, showing the absurdity of the Roman Catholic position on that as well. So you can go watch those documentaries. We don't have time to. We've addressed this countless times. Let's move on. Orthodox Church isn't Catholic. It is Greeks and Slavs.
We already dealt with that.
Well, yeah, so that was in Brian Holdsworth thing, right? Catholic is not defined by numbers, and if you knew church history, you would know that. The Orthodox Church is not apostolic. It lacks succession of apostolic authority. His own church, the Roman Catholic Church, believes that the Orthodox Church has valid apostolic succession. Yes. So I have no idea where he's getting this, or he says juridical, so maybe he means the Roman Catholic notion of the keys, because in the Roman Catholic conception of jurisdiction, you can't exercise the office of the keys as a bishop unless you're in communion with the Pope.
Yeah.
So, for example, a schismatic bishop, if you're Roman Catholic, the way they view a schismatic bishop is he's still a bishop. He has valid orders, and he can still do the Mass and it'd be valid, but he doesn't have the office of the keys, because you only have the exercise of the keys if you're in union with the Roman bishop.
That's probably what he means.
So maybe he means that, but he goes on to say, I don't think he's that sophisticated. I'm not being rude, but I don't think the argument is that sophisticated. He goes on to say, they reject the unity of the church and they lack a spiritual authority. They tried uniting around Constantine. So his idea is just that they can't have unity without the papacy. So how did the church have unity in the first 1,000 years of the church without this Vatican I view of the papacy?
Also, I don't agree with, I don't know what this is. The Orthodox Church acknowledges a bond with definitely heretical churches, but they don't.
I have no idea what he's talking about. Bond.
That's not true.
I mean, by his own definition, his church is guilty of that, because they reverence and revere Mar Nestorius and allow the Syriac Catholics to reverence people that are condemned by
that's
councils.
A great point.
So he doesn't know that. Patriarchs of Constantinople were all subject to the Pope. Now, this is a little twist, a little bait and switch they do, where the listing of the bishops in the canons they think that means Vatican I. Okay, but when it says next after the Bishop of Rome, Constantinople next after the Bishop of Rome, that doesn't mean, that's nothing to do with Vatican I. This is canonical privileges of honor. And that's why Canon 6 of Nicaea says that this is a custom. Doesn't say anything about Peter, doesn't say anything about infallible charisms, right? Did you want to say something on that?
No, that's exactly, we recognize, and again, just like in a council, there's a president, there's a head, right? That doesn't mean, that doesn't equal supremacy. So the fact that we recognize certain privileges of primacy doesn't equal Vatican I. But that's like, what do you say, the bait and switch, right? Oh, take this.
Oh, first
And it could be because they're used to arguing.
He's the first in the list, so therefore he has a universal jurisdiction and autocracy.
Yeah.
Well, that doesn't follow. And in fact, every ecumenical council enacts canons that contradict that very idea. I don't know why they can't understand that. We've covered this so many times, and I put it into the chat multiple times. We've collected every one of the canons from the 7 councils that contradicts Vatican I, and that shows that the councils don't have the Vatican I mindset. It's clear as day. So he mentions next the formula of Hormisdas, which Ubi has a great take on that, because that's of course something that Ibarra loves to bring up. Let me see. Ubi Petrus, here it is, the libellus of Hormisdas and the failure of policy. I will put that in the chat because no one knows his next argument was about the formula of Hormisdas. Okay, so now it doesn't want to fit in the chat. Let's see. Let me go to Ubi's thing. And we'll read the super chats here in a second. We're almost done reading through this. Yeah. Okay, there's the Ubi on formula of Hormisdas, which is the next point that Nolan brings up. Number 6, the schism of Constantinople was political and not doctrinal. This is easily refuted in the classic essay by Father George Dragas, where he shows that you can read St. Photius himself, who argues that it wasn't politics, it was the Filioque's theology. I mean, did these people not realize that he wrote a book talking about why the schism happened? It's called the Mystagogy. I mean, this isn't political. This is this. But there is a political dimension to this, which the papists are never aware of, which is Franco-papalism. And Franco-papalism is admitted to be a key factor in Soshinsky's Filioque book. In fact, he talks about Charlemagne, the political influence, and he confirms the Frankish thesis. So even Roman Catholic scholarship, again, has vindicated a key point of contention that they disputed forever and ever and ever. There is no such thing as a Frankish papal thing. That doesn't, excuse me, go read pages 92, 93, 94, 95, 96, 97 of Soshinsky. And it's all about the Franks and their pushing of the Filioque. Their pushing of the Filioque into Orthodox areas is the very thing that is cited by St. Photius at that time for his reason for objecting to them on theological grounds. Read the book. It's just really frustrating. I'm not trying to be mean to these people, but I mean, these are like just the most like lazy sort of just let me just throw these out from blogging and picking a few books up and quote mining it. Orthodoxy is defined by not being papal. This is something that people who we know that have criticized us keep saying this, like, oh, that's all you guys do is go against the papacy.
So first of all, it begs the question that the papacy has to be true, and if you're not that, then you must be defined solely in terms of what we're not. Because if you weren't, you would be with us, right? Well, isn't that the exact thing that's in question? And number two, the church is constantly refuting heresies and defending the faith. I mean, do we say that anytime, oh, it does that, so it's defined, the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church is simply just defined by anti-Arianism, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
exactly. I mean, you could say that about any period in church history when the church was fighting against a heresy. Oh, you're just defined by opposition to monothelitism. I mean, you could have leveled this critique against St. Maximus in his day. Oh, you just exist to critique monothelitism because that's what he spent most of. That's because he was dealing with. That was the majority heresy he was dealing with. And as it pertains to heterodoxy in the world, the majority of the Christian world is, guess what? Roman Catholic, right? Professing Christian world. So yeah, we're going to be dealing with that a lot because that's the biggest number of people, which is what he thinks is the proof of the church anyway. But he says that the Orthodox churches are defined by rejecting papal infallibility. No, you read this, right? The theological issues are first before the papal issues. Our very critique is that the papacy itself is a product of the theological errors. That's the whole point of where'd it go? I don't know. The Sherrard book. Sherrard shows that it's the theological errors that produced the papal errors. So I would say go read Church, Papacy, Schism, and we'll refute that idea. Number 8, what started in schism ends in heresy, and then he goes on to say that the Orthodox are just like Gnostics, Manichaeans, Arians, and Nestorians. Oh, really? You mean the Nestorians that your church says you can revere now, like Nestorius? That one, or what? Does he not realize that his church has changed its position on the East? And so even though he's correct to point out that traditional Catholicism says that we're schismatic, the Vatican II papacy doesn't want to say that anymore. And he says that the Orthodox are heretics because they deny the Holy Ghost, they deny the Pope infallibility, they deny communion under one species. Did you not realize that that's a change under the 10th century? So go read Welton's book and you'll realize that it's you guys that changed. Okay? Did you not know that the forbidding of the changing of the creed was at Ephesus and Constantinople? Ephesus and Constantinople prohibited changing the creed. So you changed, not us, right? And does everybody remember Eric Ibarra's response to this? But Jay, the creed changed from Nicene Creed to Constantinople I, so the creed could change. Yeah, but do you not realize that Ephesus is after that? Ephesus is after Constantinople I, and Ephesus says now you can't change the creed.
Yeah.
And do they not know that, as Welton notes, I think everybody knows this, was part of the argumentation, I think, of Dvornik, Rome resisted the changing of the creed as laid down as late as 879 to 880. Pope John VIII, through his legates, reaffirmed the opposition to the Filioque. Pope Leo III, while not personally seeing anything wrong with this idea, forbade the use of changing the creed because it violated the ecumenical councils. Yeah, exactly. That's our point. So, no, it's not us that changed. It's you that changed. And then he says that we don't teach Catholic doctrine on purgatory. Yeah, that's because God doesn't have a created fire. There's no such thing as divine created fire. The fire of God in the New Testament is the energies of God. It's God himself. The burning bush, the fire, is God. Paul says our God is a consuming fire. So there is no created fire of God. God's not a creature. Then he says, here's a quote then he says, the Immaculate Conception. Yeah, this is a bugaboo because if a Greek theologian says Mary was immaculate, we use the phrase spotless. That doesn't mean your Roman Catholic dogma of Immaculate Conception. And they'll just read into these phrases. Oh, you said spotless virgin. That means the Roman Catholic dogma of Immaculate Conception. No, it doesn't. Because we believe she died. It's called the Feast of Dormition. And your uniates have the Feast of Dormition. Why did Mary die if she was exempted from original sin? And their answer to this is, oh, because she willed to, because she wanted to be closer to Jesus. And so this is all ad hoc, right? Where in the early church was the Immaculate Conception? Oh, it wasn't there. Exactly. Because it's the Orthodox view. The Feast of Dormition was there in the first 700 years. That's Dormition death. Descendants of Adam die. It's not even, I don't know. This one's a weird one to me. But, yeah, of course we don't believe in your Immaculate Conception doctrine, because the Immaculate Conception doctrine of the Roman Catholic Church is tied to the Augustinian doctrine of original sin, which we don't believe. So it's connected to inherited guilt and all that other stuff. Anything else you want to mention before we go to the super chats for the Deacon?
That's it. I knew we could do those 8 points pretty fast.
Okay. Let's see. Let me go to the super chats. So guys, if you want to support the channel, support the show, do so by going to the Streamlabs link in the show description, which is the super chat function. And I will read your questions out to either myself or to Father Deacon or to both of us if you want. And you can also support the show by going to chalk.com to get the best supplements out there if you're looking for a alternative to supplementation. You know, a lot of the supplements that are out there are not that great. They're not very high quality, but Chalk does specialize in high quality supplementation. Particularly, I was very agitated and energized yesterday, and that's because I was taking my Tongkat. But you can also check out the daily if you're looking for overall supplementation. You can get the Action 2.0 if you're looking to just boost your energy levels. If you're looking for peer-reviewed, studied, research, proven to boost testosterone, you can get the Tongkat Ali, which is the Tongkat 100. Oh, that was a Sheila Jet. I meant to hold up the Tongkat. I took the Tongkat in the other room because I ran out of that bottle. Irish Moss, great for females that want to balance out their hormone. Here's the Tongkat Ali. There's the Tongkat Ali. You can get that. It's a great product. All of these are available over at chalk.com for the using the promo code J50. That gets you 50% off anything in the store, and they also have extended the deal to 60% off if you use the promo code J60Life. That's J60LIFE. J60LIFE, and that's for recurring subscriptions. So if you don't want to put all this information in every week, or every month, you just want to have it in there coming into your mailbox every month, use that promo code and get a little bit extra of a discount. And that supports my channel. That is the main channel sponsor, chalk.com. They're an awesome based red pill company, so definitely check them out. First super chat comes from JML, $40. What gives the Eastern Church the reason that it has to venerate the Theotokos? Is this particular to a council, or is it a tradition? I've read that Protestants think that this is idolatry. I have an answer to that, and I'll let Father Deacon go first.
Well, I think it's in Scripture. She teaches the apostles too, right? She's, but also just kind of. I mean, the problem is Protestantism is a thoroughly Enlightenment or modern and going into the Enlightenment as well thinking. So they're disconnected from the ancient mind of how one venerates people in authority. So they take modern principles and they read them back in. Well, that must be idolatry. That couldn't be but again, to venerate means obviously the ark, right? The one who carries God, who's more spacious in the heavens, would be venerated. So they really have, I think there's a couple things that lead them to this kind of mentality. There's kind of an either or. It's only Jesus or you're worshiping something else, right? You only venerate, right, God. And if you do anything else, then it's idolatry. But you see that, just with the relics too, that the woman with the issue of blood's healed through grabbing the hem of Christ's garment, right? Holiness spreads out from Christ. And holy things are worthy of veneration, right? Because everything's Christocentered. It comes back to Christ. So the reason why we venerate Mary is because of Christ. It's not that hard. And again, we don't have to have this spelled out perfectly in a council or something like that, because this is what people knew. Part of what the church is like what's handed it. It's what was known. It's not controversial at all, I don't think, and unless you take modern atheistic presuppositions and then read them back into the Christians of antiquity.
Yeah, so a little rundown on this is that Mary is the new Eve, right? Eve is said to be the mother of all living, and if you read Apocalypse 12, there's a contrast between the imagery of Mary in Revelation 12 and Eve in Genesis 1, 2, and 3. And so she becomes the new Eve because Revelation 12 says that she's the mother of all of those who are the new seed in Christ. And so if you have the Orthodox Study Bible, I highly recommend this to J. Mel, who asked the question. Go to page 1228. And there's a really good one-page article in the Orthodox Study Bible on the Old Testament types of Mary, because a lot of this Marian theology doesn't just pop out of church tradition. It's out of Scripture, and it's all throughout the Old Testament. And the reason that they stuck that note in that comes up in Ezekiel is that in Ezekiel 44, when we have this mentioning of the new temple, it's the Messiah passes through the gate, and the gate is never opened or shut, so it remains sealed. The church fathers read that as a type of the perpetual virginity of Mary. How else could the prince, the Messiah, the prince, pass through the gate, and the gate never is violated or opened, and it remains sealed? If you go to 1 Samuel and you read 1 Samuel, you'll read these prayers that Hannah does, and Hannah's prayers for a miraculous birth directly mirror Mary's prayers in the beginning of Luke. Mary is the fulfillment of Hannah. She's a new Hannah. She's a new Sarah. Sarah is the mother of the children of Abraham, and she's the mother to many nations. Mary is the new Eve, the new Sarah, the new Hannah, and Mary's also described in the Psalms. I don't remember it's like Psalm 45 in the Protestant Bible. It's 44 or 46 in the Orthodox Bible, but you'll notice that the queen stands next to the king in gold of Ophir. Who do you think the queen is? Next to the king is Jesus in that messianic psalm. Mary, clear as day. Now, to what Father Deacon said about the ark, Jamie and I have been rereading the historical books, and we just read through 2 Samuel 6. If you have the Orthodox Bible, it's 2 Kingdom 6. And that whole story of the Ark of the Covenant being in the hill country of Judea and spending, I think, 3 months there, something like that. This is parallel to when Mary goes to the hill country of Judea and spends a season, 3 months or whatever it is, with Zechariah and Elizabeth. And so, again, as the Ark of Covenant has the Holy Spirit and the Shekinah glory above it, the glory cloud above the Ark, in the Annunciation, the Holy Spirit descends upon Mary just like it did on the Ark. So the Bible is telling us that Mary is the new Ark. So, in fact, this is all throughout Scripture, and the specific title, Mother of God, which is the title that the Council of Ephesus chooses to prove that Jesus is a divine hypostasis. When Ephesus and St. Cyril use that, it comes out of Luke when Elizabeth says in Luke 1, verse 40, I can barely read that, 40 or 41. Who am I that the mother of the Lord should come to me? Lord is a divine title. In other words, she's saying, who am I that the mother of God should come to me? Because of his divinity. It means that she is the cause and source of his human nature, but the person that came forth from her is a divine person. It's the second person of the Godhead who existed from all eternity as the second person of the Godhead, who assumed human nature from the Virgin Mary. He gets his humanity from his mother. So it is absolutely appropriate to call her Theotokos, Mother of God, and that's precisely what the Council of Ephesus determined. And St. Cyril argued that the entire refutation of Nestorianism, in fact, the entire gospel, is contained within the name Theotokos, St. Cyril says.
By the way, I'd like to also recommend probably the largest collection of evidence and writings about the life of Mary and veneration is this book here, The Life of the Virgin Mary. It's a really good. You see that?
And who's that by? I can't see it.
This is by, let's see, it's a monk that composed. This is from the Holy Apostles Convent in Colorado, and the Dormition Skeet. But let's see, I forget what one of the monks compiled, and I can't remember.
I'd like to recommend too for people, because I for so long have not had this book because I gave it away. I had it back in 2007 when I first started getting into Orthodoxy, and it was one of my introductory books to Orthodoxy because it was in the bookstore at the Antiochian Church in Franklin. And I remember getting this, and for those that are looking for an introduction to Orthodoxy that is theological but more practical, that's not too heavy, because a lot of people might find Losky's theology a little challenging and difficult. I recommend the 15th century book. This is actually from 1400s, I think. Yeah, 14th century. Get Nicholas Cabasilas. Saint Nicholas Cabasilas is, I think he's a saint. Life in Christ. And this is a great introduction that will argue for the energies. It'll argue for uncreated grace, and it was written, 600 years ago. This remains a great introduction at a more basic level to Orthodoxy if you find Losky's writings to be a little too technical and too theological. So this one's a little more simplistic, and it's great. And he focuses on the mysteries and participation in the mysteries. And I have not had that book for many years because I gave the copy I had away. But one other point I wanted to make, which is that I had a really long discussion with a pretty high-powered intelligence person that will be coming out in the next few days, I think. And he brought my attention to a book I had forgotten about, which was that a lot of people think that Ratzinger is this trad, but he wrote a book together with Habermas from the Frankfurt School. So if you're under the impression that Habermas is a trad, no. Excuse me, Benedict. Benedict's not a trad. In fact, Stephen Coughlin, who I had the podcast with, he went into a lot of details about how he thinks that this is really a demonstration that Ratzinger is kind of a controlled opposition figure, and that you can see that in the way that he kind of caves into the dialectics of Habermas in this book. So I'm looking forward to reading that one. I've actually read Habermas books. I've got 2 of his books over there. I did a lecture on one of the Habermas books many years ago, but I've not read this one. So I'm looking forward to getting into that. Next super chat is BMX 1966. Shout out to BMX, longtime super chatter and supporter. Jay, can you say hi to the Pope of the Future? I am the Pope of the Future. When you see him. Yes. By the way, somebody sent me a meme of somebody had, I think, photoshopped the hats of a lot of the. We're on our way, folks. There it is. We're on our way. There's the actual Cardinals wearing the McDonald's fry hat. BMX 1966, $5. Also, can you say hi to Father Deacon Ananias? Ask him to pray for me. My name is
What?
Con? K-O-N? K-O-N?
Con?
Can you pray for K-O-N?
Yeah, let me write a note so I have his name. K-O-N?
I don't know if that's like the stands for their 3 initials, like K-O-N, like Chris O. Nesbitt.
Well, if I don't get it spelled just right, the prayers won't
work.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's their handle's BMX, and then it says K-O-N. Or
okay, I'll pray for you.
I think that's what it says. It's really small. Nefer, $10. Thank you so much, Nefer. J Mel, another $10. Jay, the book 900 Years Together. Yes, the Congar book that I just got. This one. And these other proofs. Do you think that? What do you think? Why do you think James K is not seeing reasonable arguments? James K. Who's James K?
James Cameron. James.
Who's James
James.
K?
Hurt.
So it's got to be somebody. Is that Noland? Is James K. James Noland? Or I don't know who James. Sorry, JML. Can you tell me who? If you're in the chat, put it in the chat. I don't know who James K. is, because it's got to be somebody Roman Catholic that would be reading 900 Years Together, or Uniate reading 900 Years Together. So I'm sorry, I don't know who James K. is. Constantine Meme Tarama. Constantin Mema Itarana. $10. Thank you for this video. Your videos have helped me come to Orthodoxy. My question is, what books about Byzantine history do you recommend? Stephen Runciman has a little book about the history of Byzantium that's good, that's readable. It's like 180, 200 pages. There's the Massive Beast, which I've not conquered, which is... so my godfather got me the whole... Check out this puppy here. What do you have? I can't see what it is.
This is what is it? George Ostrogorsky's The History of the Byzantine State.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it's gnarly.
Well, I can beat that one because look what Dean got me this.
Let me see. Oh man, you do beat me.
This is the Folio Society edition of the 3-volume John Julius Norwich History of Byzantium, which is a monster. This is he got me that, I think, for Christmas, but I've not read that. I did read the smaller abridged version of Norwich's Byzantium book, but so the accessible, more accessible ones would be the little Runciman book and the abridged Norwich book, and then maybe Father Deacons would be next, and then this would be like the expert mammoth. Like, I haven't even cracked these open. These are so massive.
See, when you take your books out, everything doesn't fall down, right?
Do you need a new shelf?
Yeah, exactly.
So JML, did you want to clarify who James K. is? Let's see. Mr. Smith, $5, $3. Wait until Brian Holdsworth finds out about the battle on ice of 1242 if he wants to argue God favoring Catholics in battle. Yeah, you can pick out all kinds of battles that, like, I mean, just think how arbitrary this is. So if I find, like, what if I find 25 battles where Roman Catholics lost, and I come up with 23 battles that Orthodox people lost? Oh, so now Orthodoxy is right because of the 23. They lost fewer battles. I mean, this is silly. James K.A. Smith. I don't know who that is. I don't know who these people are. Father Deacon, I have your channel linked in the chat. It is the Patristic Faith link there. Is there anything else you want to leave us with? I don't see JML qualifying who James K. is. Anything you want to leave us with?
Let's see. I'm gonna try to do some more of the people like the nightly news, and I'd love to have you on, Jay. Where when you're free, we could just both a critical, in the sense of philosophic, and also an Orthodox approach through social media and the news events and stuff. And obviously, we have to kind of take out and censor some stuff that's raunchy, you know what I mean? Like, I can't just go through everything, but people like that, I'd love to have you on that. It's been really successful, and it's a good time too. And it helps promote critical thinking and just kind of, a spiritual awareness navigating through the world too. So I'm going to keep that up. Again, you're more than welcome. Thank you for plugging Patristic Faith, and thank you for your contributions to Patristic Faith. What other news do I have? I want to thank everybody for helping me get to IOTA with the fund. I'm really excited about this Orthodox Critique of Natural Theology paper. It has to be a 20-minute presentation. So what is that? 5 pages? 5 pages. That's the hardest part, but it allows me to kind of condense my arguments. So I'm really looking forward to sharing that with all of you. And then, of course, Jay and I will discuss that some more too, because there's some great, just infallible arguments against natural theology.
Well, I mean, we have to go after the papacy because Francis is now above natural law. I mean, he can now determine the principles of natural justice because Roman Catholic theology, the trad Roman Catholic world, used to say that the death penalty was part of natural justice, but Francis says no, no longer is that the case. It's not a part of that. So natural law is now changeable by papal fiat, but
And that's why we always call it not sure Al philosophy.
JML $5 qualifying. Sorry, I didn't mean James K. I meant Timothy Gordon. Why is he blind to the east? So I don't think Timothy is blind. I think that from his vantage point, as he's told me in DMs, and then as we talked about the other day, he says I don't know about Orthodox theology. So he's like, I'm not knowledgeable of the Cappadocians. I'm not knowledgeable of Photius and energies and all this stuff. So I think that in his case, he's just simply not familiar with these things. And we did discuss the possibility of me kind of giving him, reading list and some topics. And then by next year, in terms of summertime, April, May, June, we might set up a live event in Nashville if he wants to do it. So maybe by then he will have kind of, gotten into some of the Orthodox texts. But I think that from his vantage point, he says he's just not really read these things. I don't know if he's read the book 900 Years Together. So he may not have. Maybe he has read it. I don't know. I don't know what his familiarity is with that book. I had never heard of this book until Father Peter Heers recommended it, and then I forgot about it. And then a guy who called in to the show, to the podcast, to the live stream the other day reminded me to get it. So I just got it in the mail. But, somebody asked Tim when he was on the stream why he was still Roman Catholic. And he said, well, it's the duty of a Roman Catholic to persevere and to persevere through the times of bad popes. So, I don't think that Tim has bad will. I think that when I was a Roman Catholic, that was the kind of stuff that I would say. So hopefully we can continue to have fruitful discussions. I like Tim. I think he's a super smart dude. I was really impressed with he was great. The knowledge that he had of Aristotle and Aquinas. So,
and he had a great attitude too, and I was thoroughly impressed.
So hopefully we'll chat some more in the future. Brad, $5. Does Roman Catholicism see Orthodoxy in schism since Vatican II or outside the church? Well, they've done all of this double speak to kind of make it they're so the Roman Catholic Church, they would say, subsists in the Orthodox Church. That's the language of Vatican II. So this is a new way of admitting that the church is still present in all these heterodox groups in some concentric circles way. So if you look at Vatican II and if you look at Frank's encyclicals, there's these concentric circles, and the papacy is in the middle of all the world religions. Next to them is Orthodox, being the closest to the papacy. Next to them is Anglicans. Next to them is Protestants. Then you have evangelicals. Then you have non-Trinitarians and Muslims. Then you have pagans. Quite literally, that's the concentric circles presentation that you get in Vatican II. And so Nostra Aetate, for example, speaks this way. All the world religions relate in a sort of concentric circles degree away from the papacy. So the papacy is kind of at the center of this chain of being, and then the furthest out would be the atheists and the Hindus or something. But even
it's like Origenism.
It is. Circles Origenism is all through this stuff, but they don't even realize it. I mean, the beatific vision is basically Origenism. But all right, everybody, thank you so much. You can also support me by getting the books. I do have the red book out now, which is... I got to tell everybody about the debate this weekend. So the red book is the last 10 years of theological debates and essays, as well as all the philosophical essays too. And then, of course, there's the meta-narratives book, which you can get at the website. So this weekend in Nashville, the debate, forgot to mention that. I think there might be a few tickets left, but most of the debate tickets are, the VIP tickets I think are all sold out, but you can get general admission tickets still, I think, if you go to the link right here. I'll add it to the show description. This is a debate between me and Tim Gordon's brother. I always forget his name. Ryan Gordon, Dave Gordon, Ryan. What's his name? Dave Gordon. So it's a three-way debate between evangelical pastor in Nashville, Dr. Michael Easley, who I don't know. I'm not familiar with any of his stuff. He is the graduate of Moody Bible Institute, and he has a graduate degree in master's in ministry from Dallas Theological Seminary, and he pastors a evangelical church in Nashville. I forget what it's called, Harvest or something like that. I'm not trying to be rude to the guy. I just don't remember. He's the Stonebridge Grand Prairie Bible Church, and then Fellowship Bible Church in Nashville. Okay, so that's Dr. Michael Easley, and then David Gordon is, as we said, Tim Gordon's brother. He is the co-author of Rules for Retrograde, so I guess he co-wrote that with his brother. Dave is an attorney and law clerk. He holds a master's from Franciscan University of Steubenville, and has certain research specialist stints at Catholics United for the Faith, and teaches RCIA, which is Roman Catholic Version of Catechesis, and is the editor and writer at Church Militant. So it's a three-way debate. It'll be me versus those two guys, Orthodoxy versus Rome and Protestantism. So get your tickets there at the link in Nashville if you want to go see that. It's going to be a lot of fun. I will be there with books, and I will also be there with private security that I pay for now.
I was just going to say,
yes,
throw in, I'll be there with a bodyguard.
Two bodyguards. So I actually pay I pay well, two different people to, and one of them has their concealed carry permit and all that. So,
and the other one has X-Men powers.
Brad for $5, Bazed. No, I'm sorry, not Brad. Bazed for $5, says Baze. Thank you, Baze, for $5. Anyway, guys, remember that you can still get the tickets there. I don't know if the $50 one still exists, but the $20 general admission still exists. And it's going to be a lot of fun. Hopefully, it's going to be a hype thing. It's this weekend, so it's coming up, the 10th. We got 4 days away, and we got this hefty debate. It's going to be a lot of fun. I've never done a live debate. Have you ever done a live debate, Father Deacon?
No, I don't think. Wait, have I? I don't think so.
Like maybe in college or like university.
Yeah, I was trying to think if like in junior college I did. I don't think so. I don't think I've ever done. That's great.
No, I take that back. When I was a sophomore, we had one live debate for Philosophy Club. So I have done one in-person live debate ever, but that was 20 years ago. Anyway, thank you so much for coming on, and I'll be looking forward to coming on your nightly news some point in the future. And anything else you want to leave us with before we head on out?
Blessed Nativity coming up. Just a blessed Advent season to you all. And my prayers and love. Please keep both Jay and I and everybody at Patristic Faith in your prayers. And we love you all.
Also, guys, remember, we don't get a lot of algorithmic promotion. So I really need I count on you guys to like, comment, share, turn on the notifications.